take the time to hang out together before. I'm not sure, but it's been very joyous. I mean, I haven't seen him either. You know, we did staged.
Yeah, of course.
Locked in our own houses, so we haven't actually seen each other for months and months and months. But I do feel like we've been spending a lot of time together. Yeah.
Is acting a competitive craft for you?
I mean, not principally. No, I don't think it can be, because I think it's about collaboration and it's about sharing moments to whether you're doing a scene together or whether you're rehearsing something or whether you're developing something. That's got to be a collaborative thing, and I don't think competitiveness helps with that. That's not to say that outside the kind of actual work itself, of course, it's a very hierarchical profession, so it's hard not to sometimes get little fleeting stabs of professional jealousy or schadenfreude as you look at your contemporaries sort of go up and down the slippery pole, I suppose. But I don't think that's very healthy or useful. And I think as you get sort of older and wiser and more bitter, I think that's you sort of I think maybe that's a young man's game, the competitiveness. I don't know.
When was the last time you went for a role that you didn't get? Do you have to go up for roles anymore?
Not very often these days, if I'm honest, but it still does happen.
Were you up for Hannibal?
I was up for Hannibal, yeah. That was a few years ago now.
It was.
And I didn't get that. Yes, that was weird. That's got rather reported, didn't it? Which is that's the weird bit. Usually the getting of the auditioning and the meeting people it all happens sort of behind closed doors. So there's a kind of unspoken rule amongst actors that you don't mention the jobs you didn't get or turned down, because that means somebody else was second choice. So there's an honour amongst thieves there that those things aren't spoken about. But yes, Hannibal, I did go up for and I had a couple of meetings with and about and was very keen on. But I think they quite rightly got Mads Mikkelsen, didn't they? Who was much better than I would have been.
We will never know. But were you folded in at some point? Because the creator of Hannibal did want you. He's a huge fan of yours.
What do you mean? What does folded in mean?
Well, I mean, you get, I don't know, like, when you sometimes see people in the bar in EastEnders and the Queen Vic just standing there in the background, just go, okay, yeah, give him a nod. Just to say, yeah, go. He wanted to be in it. We couldn't get you in it, but look, there you go.
Oh, I see.
There you go, holding an axe in the background of Hannibal.
Yes, I could have been, couldn't I? No, they never did, never happened. Yeah, furious. Never got over it.
So that's, how far into your career were you? Was it?
I don't know. Which I didn't get, incidentally. But yes, it sort of creeps up on you that things
God,
just
tell us.
suddenly. No, I can't. It would be ignoble.
Were you upset, or have you steeled yourself because of the years of
terrible.
rejection?
It was with these. No, I plainly didn't get it. It was a very poor meeting all round. It went very badly. So I knew there was no, I mean, disappointment possibly, but certainly no surprise.
Oh, you knew you weren't going to get it because of the meeting?
Oh God, no, it was a disaster. It was awful.
Why was the meeting so bad?
I don't know. When you just sort of, you're going, I'm not what these people are looking for.
Americans
today.
Or British people?
Yeah.
Americans,
yeah,
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Don't say like that. I like working for Americans.
Oh, I'm married to an American. I like Americans.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, but you said that like with some, Americans, was it?
Oh, they're so uncouth, David. They clearly didn't understand you.
They didn't understand me.
Right.
Well, give it someone better. That's what happened.
So you knew in the meeting, wow, this is going a bit southwards.
Yeah. I did.
Do you go into those meetings with an agent, or do you go in yourself?
No. You just go yourself. Yeah. You just puttle along. Yes, there's a whole routine to it.
You didn't take public transport.
I think I did. Yeah, I think I did.
Can you still wander around in public transport and
just keep moving? You keep moving. You wear a cunning disguise and you keep moving. It's fine.
you just get a Michael Sheen wig? Which would
No,
be
because
quite a
then
wig.
people would think I was Michael Sheen, and that, and he's very sought after for public appearances.
So, okay, very successful first season, it has to be said, of your podcast. Olivia Colman, James Corden, Ian McKellen, Whoopi Goldberg, Jennifer Garner, Tina Fey.
Michael Sheen.
Yeah, I don't want to include it because that seems like you just called up your mate, right? That's not.
Well, that's
booking.
what most of them were.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at this
them were.
list, and I'm trying to work out who was it that you couldn't just text. Out of that list of that first series, Olivia Colman, James Corden, Ian McKellen, Sir Ian McKellen, Whoopi Goldberg, Jennifer Garner, who was it that you had to go through someone that you had to kind of work hard for?
I had to go through someone for Whoopi,
right,
and Tina Fey.
Right.
Trying to think now.
How long was that process?
It sort of happened over a few months, sort of at various. We sort of banked them a little bit when I was in various different places. So there were a few. This season's been a bit more. There are fewer sort of people I can just call up on this season, and that's partly because I'd done a lot of them already, and also because it was recorded under slightly different circumstances because we were in lockdown, so it was going to be remote anyway. So it was less about, I'm in LA that week, so why don't I try and do Jen Garner and Kristen and John Hamm while I'm there. It was a bit less like that. It was a bit more sort of, we're all stuck in our house, so who should we approach? Really? I mean, there are a couple of good mates in there this year, but there's a few more people I hadn't known previously.
Why the US politician Stacey Abrams?
Because I'm absolutely obsessed with what's going on over there, and she is one of the sort of prime movers in the Democratic movement at the moment. She's a potential VP candidate for Joe Biden, and I had heard that she was a bit of a Doctor Who fan, so I thought, well, that's my in. That's my in to sort of be able to get some kind of perspective on the madness that is US politics at the moment, and try and see what her journey is through this, and get some kind of idea, some kind of insight into what's going to happen in November.
What is it that you're so obsessed with when it comes to US politics? We had John Sopel, of course, BBC's America editor, on this show. He's written a book about his year spent at the White House, which I strongly suggest, if you're obsessed with it, you should.
Oh, sure.
You should get hold of. It's a brilliant read, David. But what is it that's interesting?
Because it's so serious. Because it's so desperately serious for the whole world. Because America's at a real tipping point, I think. There's somebody in the White House who would not traditionally be elected to that office, and he is not behaving traditionally in that office, and there's a real danger that he is going to attempt to transform what democracy means in that country, and where America leads, the world follows. And I would suggest that some leaders in countries not too far away from where we're sitting right now are watching the Trump playbook with interest, and are taking some lessons from it, which I don't think are very We're at a new level now, where if we just keep saying something isn't true, eventually we stop being asked about it. Eventually it becomes the new normal. Eventually things aren't analysed and considered anymore, and people's rights can be diminished, and groups can be marginalised, and we can stop questioning it because the news cycle moves on. And if that's exploited cunningly enough by people with vested interests who are more interested in things other than the preservation of our nation, then it can become, it won't be the country that we recognise. And I think Donald Trump's a very extreme example of that, but I think it's happening all over the world, and I think it's happening here, and I think it's something we all have to guard against. And I think if the Democrats don't win in November, I think the America that we have known all our lives, will cease to be. The Supreme Court will almost certainly swing irretrievably to the far, far right, which means a lot of the human rights that people come to expect from the largest democracy in the world will evaporate. And with that will be accountability. And I think it's really dangerous and really serious and historically fascinating, but precipitous for all of us living through these times.
What role do you think actors should play in political campaigning?
Oh, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because why should anyone listen to me? And that's why I'm not asking. And that's why I'm interested in
but you
speaking
have
to someone like Stacey Abrams
before, haven't you, for the Labour Party?
A little, but I do it sparingly. I try not to do it too much, partly because I'm not qualified to do it, not because I believe I should or shouldn't. It's just because I believe there are people who are cleverer and better at it. You know, that if I was that good at it, I'd be a politician. If I had that skill set, that's what I do, because that would be my duty, I suppose. But that's not where my skills lie, and therefore I'm not going to ask people to listen to my opinions to the exclusion of all else. Now and again, I will, if I'm asked, I'll offer an opinion. But I think sometimes actors can. I think some actors are very good at it. Some actors are very well read and very well briefed and have a lot to say and contribute. I think I've got a little to contribute now and again, but I also don't want to be. I don't necessarily feel that people should. Just because I say something is so, I should expect people to agree with me. But if I have something of a platform now and again, and when the moment calls for it, I think if I can add a voice to a more educated one, to a better, a more articulate one, then I will.
It's interesting always seeing. Hollywood very much get behind, or largely get behind, the Democratic Party. But as Ricky Gervais pointed out in his Golden Globes kind of opener, that there is very much a danger of the hypocrisy of incredibly wealthy people telling people how to vote, and it being in fact counterproductive.
I think that can be true, yeah, which is why, like I say, I try not to do it too often. I think you have to choose your moments.
How much time do you spend in America?
Well, it really varies.
Well, not now, obviously. Much
yeah,
at all.
I mean, I haven't been there for a long time. Sometimes I work there, so I can be in and out, and I've spent large chunks of some years there, and other years I've not gone at all. So, but I love America. I love California. I love New York. I'm aware that California and New York do not represent all of America, and
No,
I don't know it. I don't know all of America. I don't. Which again is why I want to speak to someone like Stacey Abrams, who's right in the middle of Atlanta politics, and find and try and understand it a bit from her perspective, from someone who is in the middle of it, and who is, whether you agree with her or not, she's indubitably steeped in it and well read and clever, and
it's terrifying how polarized it is there, isn't it?
It is, and here too. I think it's something that we're all guilty of not trying to understand the other side enough, possibly, and I think that doesn't seem to be getting any better. We had it in this country with well, first of all, we had it with the Scottish nationalism, the poll on Scottish nationalism, and now we have it. Then we had it with Brexit, and now we just seem to have it kind of institutionally. This sense that you're either for us or against us. That any sense of political nuance is seen as some kind of treachery, and I think that's a problem, and something that we as separate nations have to come to terms with and try and. It's very hard to move forward if there is just a sort of 50-50 divide in any country, don't you think?
Yeah. What role, if any, do you think that television, film and drama plays in trying to connect people together?
I think what art has always done is reflected the society that creates it, and in reflecting ourselves, we see ourselves, and we perhaps get some objectivity on our lives, and some understanding of the lives of the. Yes, understanding ourselves and understanding each other. That's what art has always been about. That's why we've always told each other stories, to try and understand each other's existence. I mean, it sounds rather pompous, but that's what drama does. That's what theatre does, and that's why we tell each other stories, I think.
What's the criteria you set for yourself when taking on a role, Dave?
It varies, really, and I don't know. There are a variety of reasons why one may or may not accept a job. From an acting point of view, usually you get sent a script, and if that script connects with you in some way that feels exciting and new and different, then that's probably a reason to proceed with it. If it's working with people that you are excited to work with and inspired to work with, and think would bring out the best in you, or challenge you, or surprise you, then I think that's what you're looking to do. I'm quite promiscuous with the genres that I enjoy. So I'm always looking for the next thing to be a little bit different than the thing I've done before, I suppose. That's always a temptation for me. But it's a good story at the end of the day.
Did you want to speak to Aaron Sorkin for
Yes.
this podcast? I know you're
Yes.
a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin.
I am a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin. I'd love that. If he wants to get involved, I'm sure we can still squeeze him in.
Do you, I mean, for people that you don't know, Stacey Abrams, for instance, Whoopi Goldberg, do you make a direct, or do your people have to speak to their people? And then,
yeah. There's sort of various ways these things happen. I mean, I did know Whoopi a bit, so it wasn't a cold call as such. I just didn't have her number, so we had to go through the sort of channels. With someone like Stacey Abrams, the production company, do you know what? I don't even know. I just said, can we get to Stacey Abrams? And then a couple of weeks later, someone said she said yes. So I'm not even entirely aware of the machinations that go on.
Please tell me you have Star Trek's George Takei's number.
I don't have his number,
man,
no.
that would have been amazing if you just
I know.
texted him. He's an extraordinary individual, isn't he?
Oh, I mean, what a life that man has had. Quite apart from the whole Star Trek thing, which is extraordinary in itself. This slightly shonky TV series that got cancelled after 3 seasons and then went on to have 6 multi-billion-dollar movies after the show had been cancelled and they all thought they were out of work. Such a weird story, and amazing in itself, because that's part of our cultural furniture now, Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet, as a child, he was interned in a camp for Japanese Americans during the Second World War. As a child, he was locked up by his own country. So he's dealing with all that. He's a political activist, and then, of course, in later life, he's become an activist for LGBTQ rights. He came out in 2005, I think it was. He was the first, him and his husband, the first same-sex couple to get married in California. It was because Arnold Schwarzenegger wouldn't sign gay marriage into California law that he decided to come out and start making a stand. So he's had this incredible sort of new life in his later years as this extraordinary advocate for gay rights and gay marriage, and what a life. I mean, what an extraordinary life. He's in his 80s now, and he is sharp as a tack. I so enjoyed talking to him. It was extraordinary. There just wasn't enough time. With someone like him, you want to do a kind of 3-part episode to kind of cover everything.
There is also just a level of electric eccentricity about him. I mean, we had William Shatner on the show not too long ago.
Not a lot of love lost between them.
No, to be fair.
And they're all very candid about it.
We didn't go there. Did you go there?
Oh yeah, we talked about William Shatner. Of course we did, yeah. And but yes, there's not a lot of the usual actors' modesty between those guys, isn't there?
Oh, are you hoping then, has that inspired you when you get to a certain age, that you will then be very honest about perhaps Michael Sheen, who you've never liked?
Oh, the stuff I could tell about him. Oh, the scandal I could unearth.
We have to
I
wait.
don't think I've mercifully never had an experience quite as well, because of course they were all locked together in this Star Trek universe for years, decades, because it just kept coming back. This show would not go away, and from the pilot in 1966 to the final movie in 1990 or something, they were locked in this kind of ongoing war, it would seem. But no, George was really fascinating and very candid about all that.
So fast forward 20 years, we're not going to hear you, David Tennant, talk about how you massively hated someone that you worked with.
I don't think there's anyone who would fit that category.
That's what?
Niggle with now and again, but not. I mean, that's a sort of. It has a kind of scale, doesn't it? It's like something.
Это называется никогда, черт возьми, не торопитесь. Ну ладно, бывает.
Extraordinary partnership.
So you've never blanked anyone at an award ceremony or anything?
I don't think I have. No, I mean, I'm proceeding with caution to this conversation in case I've forgotten something that will now come screaming out of the woodwork.
Someone will text in, or another guest I'll have on the show that I'll ask about David Tennant. Oh yeah, he blanked me at the BAFTAs. Yeah, horrible man. Yeah. Dame Judi Dench, sitting down with her must be quite inspirational.
Well, she's just glorious, isn't she? She's a. You know, I dared to call her a national treasure, which she recoiled from, of course, because she doesn't want to be that. No. I think what makes her so extraordinary is how human she is, how kind she is, how she's got sort of. She has this extraordinary talent. She just seems to have. It's like when you watch her acting, I think it's like turning on a tap. It just this truth kind of gushes out in everything that she does, and it's so graceful and so. Pure somehow, and that is my experience of her as a woman. Actually, that she's got a sort of serenity and a wickedness, actually, and a sense of humor, but it all comes from a place of real kindness, and there's something pure about that woman's soul that is why I think everyone loves her. I mean, I defy you to find a word of criticism about Judi Dench from anyone. It's like being. My wife and I did a thing in Stratford that Judy was involved in a few years ago for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and we just had one of our babies at the time, and so Georgia had our little one at the time there, and Judy came up and went, "Oh, is this the Tennant child?" And she had just sort of, and as she walked away, Georgia went, "It's like she's been blessed," and it was. There's something about Judy that's just there's a serenity and a wonderfulness to her. So that she agreed to do the podcast was meant so much, and she's just fabulous. She's great.
David, thank you for coming on the show. Good to speak to you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care, man.
I'm very unnerved. You can see me, and I through this whole conversation, I haven't seen you. I've just got a black screen. Yeah.
Well, you've got great
Are you
hair.
doing this? Are you doing this show in the dark? Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's part of me dealing with modern life.
Right. Right.
Bedroom's the same, office the same.
Right.
All this. It just helps me cope.
I understand.
Take
good care. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
It's really good to speak to you as well. Take care, man.
Thanks, Niall.
David Tennant does a podcast is due to be released on August the 11th, which is, of course, today. So great timing that we got him on the show. The first series got over 10 million downloads and plays, so well worth checking out. And as you heard, there's some great guests. Okay, 32 minutes past 2. Still to come on the show, we're going to be speaking to some Wolves fans because they are still in Europe. You probably know, if you listen to the show regularly, producer Tom is a huge Wolves fan. This, of course, I'm sure had no bearing on the fact that we're talking about this. It is good. It's very good that they're in the quarterfinals of the Europa League. It's their biggest European game for nearly 50 years. And when my parents first came to the UK, the people that took them
on digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker.
Wait there. It's all right. No, you did that. It's fine. Don't worry, we did that. That's fine. It's all good. Just want to say a very quick thing. My parents first came to the UK. they were taken in, because as you probably know, in the 1960s, no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And Uncle Jack and Auntie Isabel, right, in Sidcup, took my mum and dad in, let them stay at their house. And Uncle Jack, as we called him, was a massive Wolves fan. So we've always got a little bit of time for Wolves. It's not just producer Tom's heavy lobbying and threatening to take us off air if we didn't mention this on today's show. Hit the trail!
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Now that's what a professional radio station sounds like. Smooth into the headlines with Joe Critcher.
Boris Johnson says there are bumpy months ahead, but he's confident the UK will recover from the economic downturn following lockdown. It's after official figures show the number of people employed fell by 220,000 between April and June, the biggest drop in a decade. Those who are furloughed or on 0 hours contracts with no work aren't included. Meanwhile, Debenhams is the latest retailer to announce job losses. 2,500 are going across its stores and warehouses. Health officials in Russia have approved the world's first vaccine for COVID-19. President Putin says the jab offers sustainable immunity, but the World Health Organization says it would need to carry out its own testing. And the UK's first Dutch-style roundabout has had to close for 3 nights after it was damaged by a hit-and-run driver. The £2 million roundabout in Cambridge, which gives priority to cyclists and pedestrians, was damaged the day before its official.
Celtic and Aberdeen's next 2 matches have been called off after their players broke lockdown rules. Celtic defender Bolly Bolingoli flew to Spain without the club knowing and then failed to quarantine before playing in Sunday's game against Kilmarnock, while the previous weekend 8 Aberdeen players visited a bar together. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says when it comes to lockdown guidelines, there can't be any exceptions for footballers.
People want to watch their teams, they want to support their teams, so we understand that, but there cannot be one rule for football players and other rules for everybody else. And this is not about picking on football. If it was rugby players or any other elite sport, we'd be taking the same pretty dim view of this.
Well, Celtic have condemned and apologised for Bolingoli's actions and say they'll discipline the player. Meanwhile, the Wolves boss Nuno Espirito Santos says it's a huge shame that fans can't be there to see them take on Sevilla for a place in the semi-finals of the Europa League tonight. Wolves are playing in their first European quarter-final in 48 years.
Terrible. It's so sad to come to a stadium and know that neither your fans or the opposite fans are going to be. It's so sad. It's a reality. And we have to get through it. But we know that they are back in Wolverhampton supporting us.
The match takes place behind closed doors in Duisburg in Germany. There's commentary live sport. At the World Snooker Championship in Sheffield, the 3-time champion Mark Selby is through to the semi-finals. He beat Neil Robertson by 13 frames to 7.
I thought I played well from the start of the match, First session I got off to a great start. Neil done well to get out 5-3, and then second session last night I thought I played really well, controlled it, didn't really score too well, but a lot of the frames were quite, not scrappy, but I think there was just so much good safety from both of us that obviously the frames dragged on a little bit, but kept him at bay and didn't really give him too many chances.
Mark Selby now plays Ronnie O'Sullivan or Mark Williams. They're about to resume their quarter-final match with Williams leading 6-2. On the other table, the defending champion Judd Trump has a fight on his hands to avoid a quarter-final exit. He trails Kyron Wilson at 10-6. The winner of Trump-Wilson plays Anthony McGill or Kurt Mafflin. McGill currently leads 10-6 in that one. Now, Harlequins will be without their new Springbok signings for the resumption of the Premiership season. Centre Andre Esterhuizen and prop Wilco Lowe have yet to arrive at the club because their visa process is being held up due to the lockdown in South Africa. Paul Gustard is Harlequins head of rugby.
The ability to get in and get the necessary paperwork done with the amount of places shut down, it's just taken a lot longer than we obviously all anticipated, which has been frustrating, but we've actually got numbers and there'll be a nice boost when these guys arrive to give us a lift.
Harlequins' first match of the restart is away to Saracens a week on Saturday, and this news just breaking now. The England bowler Stuart Broad has been fined 15% of his match fee for breaching the players' code of conduct during the opening test against Pakistan last week. It relates to his use of language, actions or gestures upon a batter's dismissal. That's the latest from BBC Sport.
5 Live Sports Extra.
After tests against West Indies and one-dayers against Ireland, England are ready to take on Pakistan in 3 test matches.
England need 4. Shaheen Afridi runs in, bowls to Wokes, who's on 80, and to catch it, they shout it's gone for 4. It is an edge, and England have won by 3 wickets.
and you can hear every ball, every wicket and every boundary with the Test Match special team. England versus Pakistan. The second Test, live from the Ageas Bowl, starts Thursday on 5 Live Sports Extra.
First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. Nahal Arthanaika.
So, 22 minutes to 3. Now, I don't normally do this just in case it doesn't come off, and right now I'm sure members of the production team are going, go on, no, don't, please, don't. But I'm going to anyway. Tomorrow's show, and we're doing this after the show today, I'm interviewing the legendary film director and screenwriter Oliver Stone. Yeah, I said it, Oliver Stone. Oscar winner himself. The man who wrote Midnight Express, Born on the 4th of July, and then of course directed such films as JFK, The Doors and Platoon. I'm going to be speaking to him after this show, pre-recording it, he being of course in Los Angeles, and then we shall run that interview with Oliver Stone, if he turns up and the technology works, tomorrow on 5 Live. So, home of all the big guests right here on this show between 1 and 4 p.m. each and every day, excluding Friday of course. Now, something that is very close to my heart, and if you have ever been to a gig, if you've ever been to a local gig venue, or indeed a big concert hall to go and see one of your favourite bands or acts, you will know that many venues face terrible hardship, if not closure. But then, of course, the show that you're watching happen. You go there, you sit down, you see the artists, or indeed you stand up, or indeed you crowd surf and mosh. Not allowed to crowd surf anymore. Can mosh. What about the lighting people, truck drivers, those who rig and de-rig, the lighting people, front of house, sound engineers on stage, monitor engineers, the team of people catering that make sure a gig happens. Now, catering, of course, is for a big size. Artists, because members of the live event sector, including all the people I mentioned above, are marching through Manchester this afternoon, raising awareness of the crisis facing the industry. Organisers of the Red Alert Day of Action, where venues across the UK will be turning their lights red to highlight the issue, say more than 1 million professionals are at risk of losing their jobs without extra financial support from the government. Now, Sally Cook is with us, who's the Director of Operations at iconic Manchester music venue, Band on the Wall. I've had some very good nights in Band on the Wall since I moved up here from London. I'm one of the organisers of the Passport Back to Our Roots scheme, which is getting big bands to play grassroots venues to support those at risk of closure. Sally, good afternoon.
Hi, Nahal.
It's good to speak to you. Good to have you
Nice
on
to
this
talk
show.
to you.
Can you give us a sense of the range of jobs for a venue like Band on the Wall?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I mean, Band on the Wall is a grassroots venue, and even on this, on this scale, the number of people who go into making sure that a show is a success is huge. I mean, it far eclipses the number of people who are on stage performing, for sure. In terms of the type of people, you've just summed it all up there. But you've got all of your crew, you've got your production, you've got your front of house, you've got your security, you've got all the people who work behind the bars in the venues. It goes on, and that is just venues. And obviously venues then go up in scale, and then you get to festivals. And when you're looking at the production and the number of people involved in making those events happen, it's just huge.
What have people been doing since lockdown and the fact that venues such as Band on the Wall haven't had any bands on the wall?
It's been really tough for everybody. I mean, there was obviously when the furlough scheme was announced, that provided some kind of assurance for those who were on payroll. But the whole swathe of people who are self-employed or freelancers, they fell through the cracks. So that classic sector that didn't have any help available. I know they did then obviously make some funds available for those who could show their accounts. I think it was sort of 2 years of accounts further to that. So I guess that came as a bit of assistance for them. But you just hear about some of the best crew you've ever worked with, who are delivery drivers and are doing a bit of teaching, or have gone to work in a supermarket, or the list goes on. I mean, and they're looking at being out of work now for 12 months probably. So it's really difficult, a really difficult time for them.
Sally, hang on a moment. Let's speak to Carly Bateman, who joins us now as a dancer, runs her own entertainment company. Hi, Carly.
Hi.
So, how has it been for you since lockdown began back in March?
It's been really difficult. So I run a big troupe of performers, dancers, artists, etc. And we perform in a lot of clubs, bars, venues, parties, events and all of that. And since March, obviously, we got told that, we couldn't work. The venues didn't have the budget for it anymore. And then obviously they all got shut down. They're all starting to open up again now, but they just don't have the funds / can't put in performers at the moment due to all the social distancing restrictions. So literally myself and my team have just been pretty much out of work. Like, we've got dribs and drabs from doing live streaming jobs and things like that, but it doesn't compare to what we had before. Like, we had about at least 7 events every single Friday and Saturday throughout the year, and then literally since March it's been barely anything, so quite a big hit, to be honest.
So, people have mortgages to pay, they have lives to live, which
Absolutely.
Of course involve funding. So how have people been coping, Carly?
A lot of my team have had to get second jobs, move back in with their parents and things. Like, I tried to keep morale up as much as I can and offer out as much work as I can, like the little dribs and drabs that I've been going round, but it's definitely changed performers' lives drastically.
So what can you see as being any positives on the horizon, Carly? Can you see any at all?
I just think it's going to be, I just keep thinking about that massive party that's going to happen when all of this is over, and I can just imagine there'll be venues, events, left, right and centre that want to throw masses of parties and things that we can all go and perform at, but I think it's a long time off yet, and it would just be great if there was a bit more of a light shone on entertainment and the people behind entertainment at the moment to keep people's livelihoods going. Because people like performers, they train for years and years and years to get to the level that where they're at, and it's just a shame that at the moment we're facing, can we still continue to do what we do right now, or is it going to be put on pause? Is it going to come back? It's all just so uncertain.
Sally, what does the future look like? Is it possible at all to put, or is it financially viable to put bands on with these social distancing rules in place?
That is...
So, just for
Sorry.
Sally, and I'll come back to you, Carly, on that as well. Go on, Sally.
No, absolutely. Well, that is obviously the question that's been on everybody's lips, and certainly, hotly debated among music venues. It comes down to what is economically viable. I mean, the margins on live shows in terms of, your ticket income on a packed out, sold out room are fairly small, and a lot of venues are looking to the wet sales, the bar to prop up that revenue. When you look at social distancing guidelines and you actually then stand in an empty room and look at how many people that means you can get in there safely to watch a band. 30% maybe tops of your capacity, and the other side of it is that that's not what, like, certainly with music, and I'm sure Carly would agree with her art form as well. That's not what the experience is. That's not why people want to go to a gig. People want to go to a gig to stand in that packed room, shoulder to shoulder with fellow fans, and enjoying the experience that is live music. So it's not even whether it's possible to put it on, it's whether the appetite is there. You're trying to replicate an experience that can't be replicated, really. So for us, I mean, look, best of luck to everybody out there who is putting all of the work in, tireless work to try and forge through some kind of new future of socially distanced gigs. But really, the crux of it, the heart won't return to the sector until we can properly get back into rooms for shows together.
But this can't go on indefinitely, sadly, can it, for venues? I mean, we already saw 2 venues in Manchester alone that went under, and then thankfully, and Tim Burgess, of course, from the Charlatans, was involved in this, kind of resurrecting them. But not every venue that faces this hardship will be able to be resurrected, will it?
No, and I think that is sadly the reality that we face. I mean, that's why with the Passport Back to Our Roots project, that's what we're trying to do, which is keep shining a light on the fact that aside from government support, which is welcome and necessary, and obviously the outcome of the emergency funding for grassroots venues, I think is delayed and is going to happen tomorrow now. That is an emergency measure to get everybody to a place where they're not about to go under in the next few weeks. It remains to be seen how further funds from the wider cultural recovery fund will then be distributed and allocated, and just how far that will go towards being able to keep venues going till we get to the other side of this and can actually operate under normal circumstances again.
Cardi, can you see a point where people can enjoy dance? You run your own entertainment company and still be socially distanced?
Like the lady said there, like it is one of them where I think a lot of the venues and things like that, they want to be able to get in as many people as paying customers as possible. So sometimes they will take away something like 2 dancers to be able to fit 2 customers in right now because they need the revenue. There is ways of doing it. We're working with a socially distanced rave venue at the moment, and they are going to be having performers. So there's ways around it. They did get their dates pushed back. We were supposed to do some things with them last week, but because of the second lockdown that was enforced on Greater Manchester, those dates have now been pushed back to September. So fingers crossed we might get more things coming in like that. And I mean, I think events like that will be the way forward for a while, where they really enforce social distancing and, these sorts of venues, some of these sorts of events, they see the importance of having performers, and the show doesn't go on without performers, so we will always be there. But yeah, hopefully more things like that happen, but I don't think some venues are in such a position to be able to put things like that on right now.
Thank you, Carly Bateman, dancer who runs her own entertainment company, and thank you to Sally Cook, who's Director of Operations at the Manchester music venue Band on the Wall, and one of the organisers of the Passport Back to Our Roots scheme, which does sound very interesting. Big bands playing back at grassroots venues to support those at are risk of closure. Right, just 6 years after climbing out the depths of League One, Wolverhampton Wanderers take on Sevilla tonight in the quarter-finals of the Europa League. It's their biggest European game for nearly 50 years, and the latest chapter in a season that began on the 25th of July last year. Now here's the moment their Mexican talisman, Raul Jimenez, fired them to victory against Olympiacos in the last round.
He's standing head on to the ball just outside the penalty area with his legs spread wide, hands on his hips, looks at the goalkeeper one more time, sidesteps to the left, approaches the ball and strokes it so calmly into the bottom corner. Bobby Allard dives the wrong way, and Wolves already have a lead on the night. In the 8th minute of the game, Raul Jimenez, with his 27th goal of the season, makes it Wolves 1, Olympiacos 0, but on aggregate, that is Wolves 2, Olympiacos 1.
Matt Cooper joins us now, Wolves fan from the podcast Talking Wolves and host of the Athletic Wolves podcast, The Molyneux View, and a familiar voice on 5 Live, Jackie Oakley, is here as well. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Nahal.
And hi, Matt.
Hello, hello.
Matt, I'll start with you. Nerves. Tell me about what's going through your mind right now in advance of what's happening this evening.
Oh, it's Wolves' biggest game since last week. Really, I'm very, very nervous. The performances recently have been a little bit subpar, but I've got a good feeling that Wolves are going to be able to do it. I think they're going to be able to pick the performances up on the big stage. I'm sure every single Wolves fan up and down the country will be glued to their TV sets, sweating like lizards in this heat, and I just can't wait. I'm just so nervous now.
Jackie, how are you feeling?
Well, it feels a world away. I mean, you mentioned in your introduction there that it was just 6 years ago that Wolves were in League One. I was at Crawley away when they lost that game. And I remember it well because I was about to give birth, actually, almost in Crawley. But it, and it's only 3 years ago that they finished 15th in the Championship with a goal difference of -4 and 27 points behind Reading. And you can't quite believe that in 3 years they're now potentially, well, they are 3 matches away from the Champions League. And of course, there's a huge amount of work to do before that were to become a reality. But what Nuno and the players and the club and everybody, the hierarchy of the club, have done in that time is really quite extraordinary.
Any of your kids named Nuno?
No, but one does have the middle name of Ray, R-A-E, Phoebe Ray. And not quite named after Alex Ray, but it does work.
Right, okay. I mean, just talk to me, Matt, about your love for Nuno Espirito Santo.
Well,
keep it family as well, because it's a daytime show, Matt. So let's not get too gushy or yeah.
I don't think Nuno will ever have to pay for a beer in Wolverhampton again.
I know.
He's completely idolised amongst the fan base. He's really kind of, ever since he's come in, bridged that gap between fans and the club, which had been kind of missing for a few years, and it really feels like a great togetherness. And it finally feels like we've got a manager now who he's so tactically brilliant, and he's a great leader. He's so professional, and he's just like a lot of Wolves fans are in awe of him. He has got that kind of aura around him, but we really do need to keep hold of him, and more importantly, the board needs to back him in the next window, because it's going to be a massive window regardless of where we're playing.
What's it been like? How's it changed at Molineux then? Since, Jackie, those halcyon days of Crawley away? What's the atmosphere? How different is the atmosphere at Molineux now than it was? Perhaps it's no difference at all. I'm just asking.
As well, not at the moment, obviously, but I mean, it was full, of course, when they were winning League One under Kenny Jackett, who, by the way, deserves a huge amount of credit in this, because after successive relegations, it's not exactly easy to turn around a sinking ship and steer it in the right direction, which is what he did. And of course, he was unlucky to lose his job when the Chinese owners Fosun came in. People forget that they weren't just there for the last 3 years; they were there 4 years ago, and there was that sliding doors moment when they appointed the now Seville manager, the manager they'll be facing tonight, Julian Lopetegui, who was about to be announced as manager on the same day as Fosun took over the club. And actually, last minute, he took the Spain job. Can you imagine going to Spain instead of Wolverhampton? He did that. And then they, in haste, appointed Walter Zenga. It didn't work out. And then Paul Lambert, and ended up finishing 15th. So it wasn't success straight away. But really the turning point is when Nuno came in 3 summers ago. And we've heard anecdotes of what he did on the training fields of Austria. He turned captain Conor Cody into a centre-half, which he hadn't really played there a great deal since the youth team. And brought in Ruben Neves, of course, but improved the likes of Matt Doherty now, who's one of the best wing-backs in the country, and brought the very, very best out of the players he had, as well as adding quality and bringing young players in and coaching them and making them so much better. Think of Adama Traore. He wasn't doing much at Villa. He was okay at Middlesbrough, but no end product. He has worked absolute wonders with these players to make them way greater than the sum of their parts. And it is the togetherness, together with the backroom staff as well. They have very few injuries, and they use so few players, easily the fewest in the Premier League, which is why the 59th match tonight is asking a great deal of a side that looks to be really limping towards the end of the season, and trying to use that togetherness to get them over the line.
Now, Matt, with, of course, the increased success of Wolves, you may have noticed new supporters come, some of which may be wearing half and half football scarves. I can't say for sure. Are you the guy that moans about these people, or are you fully accepting of the fact that now Wolves are getting a bigger and bigger club? They will, of course, attract people. People will come out of the woodwork who perhaps weren't at Crawley away like Jackie Oakley was.
That's always a debate on Twitter about who was at Crawley away with these super fans. But no, I think that's the price of success, really. As long as you keep that core fan base of Molineux, and it is on each day, it's a tremendous fan base. Molineux's rocking for most games, and you are going to get those kind of those fans coming in, especially from Mexico with Jimenez. He's extremely marketable. That the third kit this season was based on Mexico colours. Again, it's a great touch from the club, but it is really that the price of success, and you are going to get tourists to come and watch games, and with the increased capacity to Molineux in fans too. It's just one of those things, but as long as we keep the core supporters and they keep going there, there's no complaints from them.
And Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, they need more. They need a greater fan base around the world, of course. And don't forget, this is a club that was hugely successful in the 1950s, and again to a certain extent in the 70s. And a lot of the supporters I know from the London. You gather new fans around the world. But the Molineux situation is an interesting one because they need to increase the capacity from the early 30s. It's all gone a bit quiet on that front, so we're not too sure how they're going to proceed. They promise they're not going to move away from the centre of Wolverhampton, but I think they need to be sure of their immediate future in the Premier League and ideally in the Champions League before they take that next giant leap capacity-wise.
There's going to have to be an investment, though, isn't there? Not just in the, and we know what happens when you invest in big building projects. What effect it can happen, what effect it can have on the team, Jackie. So how optimistic are you that your club can do both very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they are 3 matches away from the Champions League. That would accelerate matters greatly. It is asking a great deal, but they have to invest. They have such a tiny squad, and they are really sort of struggling under that burden with so many matches. But with the infrastructure they've got there, with the backing of Fosun, things are looking extremely optimistic.
Brilliant. Jackie Oatley, thank you very much for being on the show today from the Athletics Wolves podcast, The Molineux View, and also Matt Cooper, who's a Wolves fan, from the podcast Talking Wolves. And very best of luck to Wolves tonight against Sevilla. It will be on 5 Live Sport. We'll build up from 7 o'clock, so make sure you check that out.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 3 o'clock. This is Justine Green. Boris Johnson has said there are bumpy months ahead, but insisted he was confident the UK would recover from the economic consequences of the coronavirus pandemic. He was speaking after figures showed employment in the UK suffered its biggest fall in more than a decade between April and June. The number of people in work dropped by 220,000. Kerry Bell, who's 56 and from Leicester, has just been made redundant from her job in HR.
I'm the major breadwinner for our family. I live with my husband and my 2 teenage children. My husband is currently at risk of redundancy himself. My daughter is 17. She was made redundant yesterday from a little part-time job that she has. And my son's going to university next month. So financially, we are going to struggle.
Debenhams is to cut a further 2,500 jobs because of the pandemic. The retailer collapsed into administration 4 months ago. It has reopened 124 stores since the lockdown, but says trading is still a long way from returning to normal. President Putin says Russia has become the first country in the world to give regulatory approval to a vaccine for COVID-19. He insists it is effective, but there's concern internationally that human clinical trials of the drug have been running for less than 2 months. Dr. David Nabarro from the World Health Organization says the vaccine won't be made widely available yet.
Nobody wants anybody to have concerns that when coronavirus vaccines are made available, that they have had anything other than the full safety and efficacy testing according to the appropriate protocols. In my experience, this is a process that does take several months. When I say several months, I really do mean 6 months or more.
Immigration Minister Chris Philp has promised a new plan to stop migrants from crossing the Channel from France, following talks with officials in Paris. Mr Philp praised the work of the French authorities trying to stop boats from leaving, but said the numbers arriving in Britain were still completely unacceptable. He didn't give any details of the proposals. Young people are back in the classroom in parts of Scotland after 5 months of lockdown, with schools in the Borders and Shetland the first to reopen. Face masks aren't required, but hygiene and safety measures are in place. These pupils from Kelso High School in the Borders explained how it felt to be back.
I'm obviously worried about the virus and whether or not it's going to get spread, but the school knows what it's doing.
I think it is the right
thing to do because everybody has to progress at some point, and I think now is a good time.
It's quite good to be back at school because this means life's somewhat getting back to normal. There's a lot of faces I've not seen for a while, so it's good to be back.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said football matches involving Celtic and Aberdeen will not be taking place this week because of breaches to COVID-19 restrictions. It's emerged that a Celtic player failed to self-isolate after returning from Spain, while 8 members of the Aberdeen squad visited a bar together. That's the BBC News. It's 3 minutes past 3.
The best live sport.
Europe's elite club competition.
The Champions League. After a commanding performance against Real Madrid, Manchester City are in the quarter-finals of the Champions League on Saturday night with an 8 o'clock kickoff from Lisbon. It's Manchester City versus Lyon. This is 5 Live. First for news and the best live sport. This is BBC 5 Live. Nahal Arthanaika.
Okay, here we go. Now, I'm always amazed by human ingenuity, the ability of humans to create extraordinary pieces of art, whether it be architecture, whether it be music, or whether in the case of Craig Mazin, to create the brilliant Sky Atlantic and HBO miniseries Chernobyl. I caught up with Craig last week and we're going to be hearing that interview in about 10 minutes time here on 5 Live. If you've got time in the next hour between now and 4, just to kind of stop what you're doing and listen out to this guy. I mean, of course, it's on a must-watch special now, so you could go to BBC Sounds, listen to it, but if you want to listen to it live on this show, then please do stay with us because he is just such a dude. Craig Mazin. Imagine that coming out of the mind of a human being, how brilliant it is. I've just started re-watching Chernobyl, actually, and it's every bit as good as it was the first time I watched it. So that coming up, so stay with us here on 5 Live. Now, as we've just been hearing in the news, there's been more bad news on the jobs front. Debenhams has announced it's cutting 2,500 posts. It comes on the day the number of people employed in the UK has fallen to its lowest level since 2009. 5 Live Money's Danny Hewson is here. Let's start with this story about Debenhams and 2,500 workers who work for Debenhams. Danny, what's going on?
I'll answer to Debbie as well. It's
no,
funny.
Sorry, I missed it. I just put Debbie and it's Debenhams. I think that's where I got mixed up. Danny Hewson, 5 Live Money. Hello, Danny.
Hello, yes. We've talked about Debenhams before, haven't we, Nahal? And this isn't the first time, even this year, that they've announced redundancies. So they put it into administration for the second time in a year in the spring, pretty much as lockdown began. And at that point, they said that they were going to get rid of 4,000 posts, which was about a third of its workforce. Today, they have announced another 2,500 jobs. They've said that the current trading environment for retailers is a long way from returning to normal. Now, what we've been told is that these jobs will be in stores that are all shut any more of the Debenhams stores. They've got over 100 now reopened since lockdown. They've closed 35, which will stay closed for good. But clearly for Debenhams workers, this has been a really difficult time for them. They've been wondering whether or not the store would survive for over 12 months. And clearly the current trading environment just means that they're really struggling.
Danny, you have a guest with you, I believe, Catherine Shuttleworth from Savvy Marketing.
Yes, indeed. We're going to just talk about the big picture first of all, because you were talking about the fact that employment in the UK fell by the largest amount in over a decade between April and June. This is jobs figures which came out this morning and just really demonstrate what a difficult situation it is for everybody out there looking for a job, currently employed, currently on furlough. And retail is one of those environments where they have been hardest hit, which is why we've got Catherine Shuttleworth with us from Savvy Marketing. Catherine, let's just talk about Debenhams first of all. Were these job cuts expected?
I think we know that the high street is in difficulties, and we know that Debenhams have made some difficult decisions. But I do think that this has come as quite a shock to people working within Debenhams today, and certainly having had a read about what people are saying is it came a bit out of the blue, because this is a big reality is their stores were shut for such a long time. They've got a mammoth mountain to climb, and this business is continuing restructuring. It kind of feels a bit like, I'm sure if you work for Debenhams, a death by 1,000 cuts today.
Yeah, we've had a statement from Usdaw, the union which represents a lot of Debenhams workers. They say this is devastating news. We've been contacted by members who say they're being made redundant by conference call with no meaningful consultation or proper notice period as required from law. We'll look into that a bit more. But just generally in terms of retail, Catherine, this is an environment that the high street was struggling before the pandemic, and it almost seems as what's happened with COVID-19 has just sped things up.
Absolutely, and you're right, it was in a fairly perilous state. We've talked at length about the changing way in which we shop, shopping more online, spending our money in different ways, and what the pandemic did was that gave us no alternative than to shop online, and it doesn't look like we want to rush back into stores in a hurry and spend money. Plus, of course, that we are concerned about what the broader economy of our household looks like, so we're not buying things that we don't need. And this, of course, on top of not selling anything for weeks and weeks and weeks, is a really toxic mix for retailers. So those retailers who were already a bit wobbly, and I think it'd be fair to say Debenhams was already pretty wobbly, are having to make even further cuts into their business, which does make you wonder how long can this survive and be sustained at a time when we're just not spending as much money.
I've got to talk to you about Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley wanted to buy Debenhams last year when it went into administration. He was unsuccessful. There's a lot of speculation that he's going to now try and pick up at least 30 stores. Why is he still looking to expand his Fraser's empire at a time when lots of people are closing stores?
Well, he's a very canny businessman. What he'll try and do is he'll try and buy stores at the cheapest possible price where he knows there is a gap in the market for them. And because he's now got his Fraser's group with House of Fraser stores and Sports Direct stores, he understands the British High Street pretty well, and he knows where there is money to be made. And also, he'll have a point to prove with Debenhams. They wouldn't let him buy it last year. It's not got any better without him. He still believes that there is stuff he can do in the High Street that will make a difference. So I think we can expect him to look at picking up some of these stores because he thinks he can run them better than anybody else can.
Thanks, Catherine. We are expecting a financial statement from the Fraser's group on Thursday, so we'll get some more information there. We'll just leave you now with a statement from Debenhams. They say such difficult decisions are being taken by many retailers right now. We'll continue to take all necessary steps to give Debenhams every chance of a viable future. It also says that the people affected had been informed, thanked them for their service and commitment.
Danny, thank you. 5 Live Money's Danny Hewson there. Roddy Forsyth has breaking news about the Scottish Premiership. Hi, Roddy.
Good afternoon, Neil.
Good afternoon. Now, this relates to the lockdown breaches at Aberdeen and Celtic. What's happened?
Well, Scottish football only narrowly avoided a complete shutdown imposed by the Holyrood government. But as I revealed earlier, tomorrow night's game between St Mirren and Celtic is off, as is Aberdeen versus Hamilton. That's also tomorrow night. Plus Saturday's match between Celtic and Aberdeen. They're all victims of the fallout from the COVID-19 breaches at Aberdeen and Celtic Park, where it was revealed that defender Bolly Bolingoli had been to Spain and back without quarantine and played against Kilmarnock at the weekend. He didn't tell the club that he'd been. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said this time it's a yellow card, but next time it'll be a red, and the Scottish football authorities are not in any doubt about that. They have actually released a statement through the SFA and Scottish Professional Football League joint coronavirus consulting group, and they've said that they were utterly astounded to learn of the recklessness demonstrated by Bolly Bolingoli in his breach of government public health guidance and football protocols. There's an investigation going to go ahead at Celtic. As I understand it, they have no idea why he went. He simply did this at short notice, didn't tell anybody he'd done it, didn't tell anybody he'd gone, otherwise he wouldn't have been in the squad for the game against Kilmarnock, and so he imperiled the Kilmarnock players and staff and also the Celtic players and staff. No one has at the moment a full explanation or any kind of plausible explanation for why he did what he did, which was take a day trip to Spain.
It's a little bit bizarre, to say the least, isn't it? Very quickly, Roddy, it's fair to say that the return to football action on the pitch has been a far less smooth affair in Scotland than in England?
Well, it seems to have been bumpier, and certainly the problems at Aberdeen came about because of what you might call fairly typical behaviour throughout British cities on a Saturday evening. 8 of the squad just decided they wanted to have a meal and a drink, and off they went, not realising that the rules in Scotland say that members of 8 households cannot meet together. The limit is much smaller than that. So so in one respect there was a certain element of daft boydom amongst the Aberdeen players, but utterly inexplicable behaviour from Bolly, and we wait for an explanation.
Roddy, thank you. That's Roddy Forsyth for us there, talking about the Scottish Premiership. A few days ago, Chernobyl, the Sky Atlantic and HBO mini-series about the 1986 Soviet nuclear meltdown, became the most successful show in BAFTA history. The series was written and created by Craig Mazin, and before that was best known for penning comedy scripts for the Weinstein Company. Now, fresh from the success of Chernobyl, he's busy adapting the smash hit PlayStation franchise The Last of Us. That's going to be for HBO. Now, you'll hear the conversation that Craig and I had shortly. First, here's a reminder of just how good Chernobyl is.
Cut the phone lines. Contain the spread of misinformation.
What would happen to our boys?
The pain is unimaginable.
In 3 days to 3 weeks, you're dead.
You can see him, and you cannot touch him. Do you understand?
What happened on the night of the accident?
Asking the right question will get you the truth. There is no truth.
What happened then? What happened after? All of it. All of it. Madness.
Do you feel validated now? All the awards, all the nominations. I mean, we talk so much on this show with so many successful people, and you being one of them, but that feeling of someone's going to tap on my shoulder one day and go, hey, come on, guy. We found you out. We figured you out. Come on, out you go. Take your stuff. Get out.
Well, I'm pretty sure they still can do that. No matter what happens, they're always out there.
That's how much over budget you go, right?
That's not even that. It's just opinion. Public opinion is fickle, and Hollywood is full of stories of people going up and down. All those wonderful rise and fall stories. I've had a very non-up and down. My roller coaster is flat. It's really just I just had a road. It's just been, and then we got to this, and yeah, it is validating. And I think on some level, I'm supposed to be stronger than that, and I'm supposed to not need to be validated by things like this, but I am, because there is something about your peers recognizing you, specifically the people that know exactly how hard it is to do the things that we do. Validation is a great word, and I've forced myself to accept it. It will fade and be replaced by self-loathing very soon. But right now, there's some validation, yes.
I thought it was really interesting something that you said, talking of Caroline Strauss and Johan Renck, the director, of course, and Jane Featherstone, who you worked with on Chernobyl. You said it was so important for me to work with people who are kind and nurturing and supportive of each other, which of course begs the question, that hasn't always been the case, presumably.
That hasn't. I mean, listen, there was a while where I would say, I worked for, I think about, 8 years or so for the Weinsteins, and people would say, oh yeah, I've heard that it could be hard, and I'm like, I don't think you know. Well, everybody kind of gets it now, although obviously I didn't have the full force of Harvey's criminal activity, but it was difficult. And everybody lived in a kind of atmosphere of tension and fear, and it got ugly, and it was bad for me personally, it was bad for me physically and mentally and emotionally, and when it was over, I did try and make an effort to work with people that I found some sort of joy with. It's really hard doing what we do. There are going to be days where, because of the weather or honest, reasonable disagreement between good people, it's going to be hard to pull the day's work off. And really, you kind of only get that day to do that work. And everyone is holding themselves to a high standard. The writer is protecting something that she or he has believed in for so long, and the director is protecting this job they have, which is to interpret, and the thing that they're going to be held responsible for is the day's footage. And the actor is protecting themselves, because they're going to be the ones out there saying this stuff and doing these things. And when we get it back into theaters, they'll be doing it, 50 feet high. Everybody is scared. And out of that, if you can love each other and have each other's back and be decent and kind to each other and empathetic, it just goes much more enjoyably. And we do deserve that. We can torture ourselves. We just really can't torture other people. That's kind of the deal.
Were you ever concerned, being in the orbit of that Weinstein toxicity, that it would infect you?
No, in the sense that I would become.
That you would think that was the only way to be successful, because of course Hollywood tolerated his toxicity, even though it was widely known how horrific he was, because he was making money.
Yes. No, it never occurred to me that would be something I ought to do, nor is it something I'm constitutionally capable of doing.
Good to hear.
Well,
for your family and everyone around you.
Sure. Well, I think that there's some people who are drawn to the entertainment business because they are, you started with validation, and that's probably the best word for it. They're seeking validation. Like, my therapist once said that people come to Hollywood looking for the attention and love they did not receive as children. I think there's a lot of that going on. But then there's this other kind of person that comes to Hollywood who is essentially coming there to dominate and to win. It is a glamorous business to be in, and those people are probably sociopaths. Like, I don't know how else to describe them. And we have both in this town. We have sociopaths, and we have people who are striving for a kind of validation. And the sociopaths really do enjoy taking advantage of the validation seekers. And that's what happens. There was never a question that I was going to become like that. The question was, what exactly are these guys doing for me that makes me want to stay? And that, as it turns out, was a kind of ugly validation that anybody in a bad relationship could probably recognize.
How did it affect you?
Well, there was a period of, and this will tell you a little something about me. There was a period of about, 8 years where I had a headache almost every day. And headaches are, they sound mild enough when you say headache, but sometimes, they would turn into the kind that put you down. And it was almost every day. I don't have a brain tumor. We had that checked. What I had was this terrible stress and this need to perform at a level while still being made to feel like I could never actually achieve whatever acceptable was. And it made me ill. It made me physically ill. And I'm lucky in the sense that I'm not predilected to trying to solve my problems with pills, because a lot of people go down that road and never return. I mostly tried to solve my problems with bread. Carbohydrates are really good. So I had that going.
Well, you are lucky, because culturally, a challah bread is a very tasty form of bread on a Friday to have. I could eat that every day of the week, if I'm honest with you.
I wasn't picky. Pita was fine. It didn't really matter. The good old-fashioned rye.
So carbs is a good way.
Pasta. It didn't really matter. Potato chips. So yeah, that's I survived it, but it did take a toll. And I remember I was heading back to a production we were doing in Vancouver, and I was just so miserable. My son was very young. He was only his baby, and I said, something like, if you think I want to do this, you're terribly wrong. I'm going there to work on something that I think is probably going to be terrible, and ultimately it will be blamed on me. And that's what and I'll be yelled at for it anyway, no matter what happens. And anyway, that's what I get to do. That's what I get to do. It was a dark period because I didn't understand necessarily I didn't understand that there was a better alternative, and my God, there's a better alternative.
Yes, there is.
There's a wonderful light at the end of that tunnel.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. There certainly is, with all those nominations. Best miniseries leading actor for Jared Harris, best supporting actor for Stellan Skarsgård, as well as 11 on the TV craft side. This is just the BAFTAs I'm talking about. I'm not even going there with the Golden Globes and the Emmys and all the other things. Right. Where do you keep them? These awards that you've got, where are they?
I mean, I've got some over there on the table there.
Yeah, I can see them there, all shiny.
Yeah.
All looking good.
I have them in my office, and then I keep one at home in the kitchen, just because it seems like, your kitchen should have like a little award, like some sort of kitchen idol, to bless the preparation of food. And,
with incense sticks attached to it.
Yeah. It's very nice, but I must admit that it's a little bit like writing, that there is no joy like having had writing. Having had written is the beautiful thing, right? Writing is rough. Having had written is rough.
Right. There's something incredibly sad, though, Craig, isn't it, about doing something that you love, but then in that process of doing something you love, you have people around you that suck the joy out of that and make that an experience that you don't want to do.
Well, then you are ultimately responsible to find a path for your own joy. I mean, I never looked at myself as a victim per se, although I suppose I was in some ways, certainly not in comparison to the many women we know were tormented and abused by Harvey. But it seemed to me at some point that I had to make a choice, and I made a choice. And I sat down with my then agent, and I said, I like to make a choice, and this is it. And the choice is if there's a certain amount of financial security, I have a family to support, I can support them. So I want to start taking risks and trying different things and being as good as, and having the work be as good as I think I am now, after all this time learning and practicing and plying the trade. So I made a choice, and I'm so happy for it. And part of what came out of that was working with people like Carolyn and Jane, who, because we started. That was we began with the three of us. It began with me, then I went to Carolyn, and then Carolyn and I.
Так, у меня небольшая техническая пауза. Минут на 5.
The three of us were a very happy family. I'd never experienced something in production that was so loving and supportive and smart and why Chernobyl exploded are not boring, but they're not boring to me mostly within the context of the outrageous expense of humanity that occurred and the outrageous failure of humanity that instigated it. And she managed to find these wildly diverse stories. And within those stories, again, were these little moments. A little moment of a soldier describing how this old woman wouldn't stop milking her cow, and he would dump the milk out and she would keep milking. And I took that little bit as a kind of framing device for this older woman to talk about, the experience of what it's like living in 20th century Ukraine. So there's just it's the milk bit that just seems so specific and memorable to me. And there were stories of soldiers who had to go around killing dogs. And, what we showed happened. And that's the other part of it, is that you start to feel the life of it all through the words of these people, including some of their own confusions. I mean, there were a number of liquidators in her book that spoke with great anger and bitterness toward the Soviet Union. And then there was, one in particular who not only didn't have a problem with the Soviet Union, wished it was back, and felt that being in the zone as a liquidator kind of freed his mind. We are all so different, and I love that. And so her book was phenomenally important to me, and it's a hell of a thing. Everybody should. And she has other wonderful books too. I think she's remarkable, and there's a reason she has a Nobel Prize.
Were there any preconceptions that you had before embarking on this process that you shedded throughout as you went deeper and deeper into it?
Yes. I suspected, as an American who grew up the height of the Cold War, the 70s and 80s section of the Cold War, that life in the Soviet Union was probably like what we were being told. And what we were being told was kind of a cartoonish version, probably, of the worst of it under Stalin. And the more you dig into that time and take a look, you realize that while there were deprivations and rights were curtailed and people did go to prison for things that they should not go to prison for, that in the mid 80s in the Soviet Union, they had lives, they had children, they had joy, there was work to be done, and they did not live in this kind of grim society where every day you stand in a line and wait for toilet paper for 19 hours. It's just, that wasn't it. Behind them, there was always this specter of disaster, because that is the story of Eastern Europe in the 20th century. Just disaster, one after another, from Tsarism to revolution, World War I, Stalinism, Holodomor, World War II. It's just one after another, and Chernobyl was sort of the final Soviet disaster. Although, no, I take it back. The earthquake in Armenia followed shortly thereafter. So the second to last Soviet disaster. And so these were proud people who found a way to chisel out joy from the cold granite of the world around them. And that was a revelation. And that's something that we really were committed to showing. It's why the final episode begins the way it does, by showing what life was like in this Atomgrad, this atom town of Pripyat. Just, even up to a day before the accident, it was actually a very nice place to live. It was a very beautiful place, and people there had hopes and dreams and a future and a life. There were smiles. And from our point of view over here in the West, I don't think we saw too many Western-made shows about Soviet life where anybody was smiling ever for any reason at all.
No. Even if it was in color, it was in black and white emotion. It wasn't always.
Exactly right.
So, does does the story birth the themes, or do the themes birth the story, in the sense that the theme being that this is what happens when we disconnect ourselves from the truth? Does that come from the story?
It's a bit of a chicken and egg. That theme was always there. But there are competing themes. There are a lot of themes that can come out of Chernobyl as you're reading through it and you're talking about it. One of which is just the resiliency of the human spirit. But as I was writing scripts in 2016, and the world seemed to be telling me, of your competing themes, this one feels like the one that matters the most. And I think that turned out to be true, that it was a question of what happens when we debase the truth, when the truth becomes almost mockable. The thought that you would just say the truth is childlike to them, and that the lie is elevated to reality. And the more we went through, even as we were getting into production and then continuing, it just became more and more clear that that was the crux of it all for us, and it became the organizing principle of everything we did. That when you get to the end of this, your understanding is what you just saw, you needed to see so that this doesn't happen again. Well, that doesn't mean so that people in a control room don't press the following buttons in the following order, but that we don't allow a culture where the truth is so malleable that when inconvenient, we just simply kick it aside, because it is not gone. We, as humans, just have this thing where we close our eyes and poof, the problem disappears. And we're having it all the time. We have it right now, especially with things we can't see. The coronavirus, we can't see global warming or climate change until it's upon us. We can't see it. There's been a rash of these things here in the United States where we have somewhat high-profile people insisting that coronavirus is an overblown hoax, and then they either get it or a family member gets it, and suddenly it's not an overblown hoax, and it is somewhat serious. Suddenly it's real, but it was real before that. We have to be able, as humans, to appreciate the reality of things that have not directly happened to us. I'm not sure how we lost that somewhere along the way. And we're seeing it right now with a reaction here in the United States, but I've also seen it happily in the UK as well, to racism, to inherent racism, which white people just don't have to see. If I don't see it, then, it's not there. But it is, it is. And the rise of the camera in our phones may ultimately be the thing that finally unwinds the entrenched racism in our cultures, because now at last we cannot look away. We see it all the time. So that's what we were going for. And that is the lesson we hope to impart. And I have to say, I can't tell if we're a success or a failure, because every day someone will say, oh my God, this is just like Chernobyl. And I think that's okay. So on the one hand, success. On the other hand, it's still happening. So, I mean, the hope is that maybe
that's the terrifying thing though, Craig, is that this isn't a case of I can look and watch Chernobyl and look at it as a quaint capsule of history.
Yeah.
Right? And marvel at the idiotic excesses of the communist system. This is fully functioning part of how certain players in Western democracies, what you have, of course, a president who it's verifiable that he, at the very best, has a strained relationship with the truth, pretty much. Right. And these are verifiable facts. I'm not being, as a BBC presenter, I'm not being. These are verifiable facts.
That's a fact. That is a fact. And yes, he lies as easily as anyone breathes. And I've said many times that the Soviet Union, that system, didn't arrive here from another planet. We didn't receive it from somewhere else. Humans made the Soviet system. That means humans can make the Soviet system anywhere on this large round rock. That is within all of us. The desire in some people to dominate and repress and control and distort reality. Dictators like this, since the beginning of time, in nearly every corner of the world, except, interestingly, in the United States, we've had this system where no one's ever really been able to do it quite like that. And now we have this guy, and boy, is he trying. We have this human capability to distort the world around us to benefit us. And all of this stems from some kind of strange human shame that we have. And we deal with it in our different ways, but some people deal with it in a very destructive way. And when entire systems are built around it, then the truly terrible things will occur. And unfortunately, we see it happen over and over again. We know that lies and distortions lead to natural disasters, they lead to genocides, they lead to suffering, and we keep doing it. And either we are going to break this cycle at some point or be consumed by it. But as the internet accelerates our human interactions, it becomes a kind of accelerant for both our best and worst impulses. So I guess we're going to find out sooner than we would have if good beats bad. And that's kind of where we're at.
It would be remiss of me to not mention Last of Us.
Mm-hmm.
And the work you're doing in Last of Us with HBO again.
Yeah.
Obviously a very fruitful relationship for them with Chernobyl and what you've achieved with Chernobyl. Where are you at with Last of Us?
Well, I'm working on Last of Us with Neil Druckmann, who's the creator and visionary of the game. And at this point, I've started calling it the novel because really it's like there's this large novel called The Last of Us, and then there's an even larger novel called The Last of Us 2,
yes,
both of which are near and dear to my heart. And so what we're doing is we've essentially mapped it all out, at least the first cycle of it, how we want to do it. And the next up, we're going to start writing. And I can't say much about it other than to say that I would think the one anxiety that I think fans of something have is that when the property gets licensed to someone else, those people don't really understand it or are going to change it or make it stupid. And in this case, I'm doing it with the guy who did it. And so the changes that we're making are designed to fill things out and expand, not to undo, but rather to enhance. And that, but we are also, we're doing both. We're creating the new, and we are also reimagining what is already there to present in a different format. It's a kind of a dream come true for me. I mean, this is one I've been just like thinking about on my own as a fan for a long, long time. And I'm a little scared because everybody's emotions connected to this game are rather intense. So I keep saying,
you wait until it comes out if you think it's intense now, right? I mean,
yeah, I think I'm gonna probably go hide in a bunker for a while because you can't make everybody happy, you know.
No. But it's an unusual situation, Craig, because of course those people who have loved that game since it first came out, 7 years ago, they have been Ellie or Joel, right? It's not as if you've read a book and it's an interpretation of it. You've lived that experience through the game. That's a very interesting, and you've done that as well, right?
100%. And that leads us on our side to all sorts of interesting questions about how to both re-experience that, but also decouple that from the game experience, because you can't repeat the game experience precisely. And as you say, you are, I mean, it's not a first-person game, but you are a character, your perspective character. For almost all of The Last of Us, you are playing Joel. You play as his daughter Sarah very briefly, and then you do play also as Ellie to a bit more significantly. But ultimately, you are Joel. When you're watching a television show, you are not a person. You're all of them. Hopefully, you are connecting with or experiencing something with all of them. So it's a very different way of approaching narrative, and it requires us to make certain choices as well. But everything that we're doing is being done with extreme care and thoughtfulness for what we know we love about it. And certainly Neil has enough experience talking to fans, so he understands what they truly love about it. And so our goal is to it's not to keep you in love with The Last of Us, it's to make you fall in love again with The Last of Us in a different way. It's a passive way in the sense that you are taking it in, you're not playing it, but you are experiencing more with more characters in more ways. And it's going to be, I think we've got something good going.
Because of the nature of the game in itself, which was kind of revolutionary in the way that there was plot development and character development, is the aim to go deeper, to take what that element was that made it so interesting and go, right, how does this format, making it for HBO, allow me to go further and further into that?
Yeah, I mean, there was, for a time, they were trying to make a movie of it, and I can understand why it didn't work out, because the joy of a story like The Last of Us is in its length. It's in a journey, and it is in a slow creation of a relationship. We understand inherently that relationships that are earned over time are more precious and more deserving defense. And so it had to be in this format. And without question, we intend to deepen people's connection to, well, first of all, we're going to be introducing this to a lot of new people who don't know the story, of course. But if you have played the game, all I can say is that you will, our intention is that you will watch the show and say, this has violated nothing of what I loved about the game and what I witnessed in the game, but it has also brought me a whole lot more things that I did not know. Really kind of amazing things I did not know, to the point I will say, like, Neil at one point, he's like, there was one thing we were talking about for a while, and then he told me what it was, and I was like, gonk, like, okay, jaw drop, that's going in for sure, that we have to do that. You couldn't stop me from doing that. You will have to shoot me to stop me from doing that. So we're doing that. And there's quite a few things like that where it's not like, oh, we just decided, like, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was like one episode where Joel and Ellie get on motorcycles and confront a motorcycle gang? That's not what we do. There's no episodic nonsense here. This is all very much like curated, but the things that are new and enhancing of the storyline that we're doing are connected in organic, serious ways that I think fans and of the game and newcomers alike will appreciate.
When do you think we'll see this?
2096. If you are, I don't know.
You are a terrible man, Craig Mason. You are a horrible man. Go on.
You will see it as soon as it is done. I promise you that.
Where are you in the production process?
Well, we are writing. We're in the writing process. Obviously, right now in the U.S., we're not even allowed to fly to any country in the world other than possibly French Polynesia. Which is a very lovely place. I mean, kind of ironic that the one place I want to go to the most, Bora Bora, does still allow you to go. So we can't, production here is very limited right now. So we're taking the opportunity to write, but ideally we will be rolling cameras as soon as we can. And everybody, I mean, look, the great thing about HBO is their primary focus is make us something wonderful. And it takes a little extra time, That's what we're gonna do, is make something wonderful. And so we're not following, there's no network schedule of it debuts next September and the new fall schedule. It's not like that.
Yeah. their fourth quarter share price does not depend on.
Right. I kind of like nobody was sitting around waiting for Chernobyl. Nobody knew there was going to be a Chernobyl, and then Chernobyl. So, hope people probably forget over the next few months or something. We'll see. And then,
okay. So you'll be dropping The Last of Us like a Taylor Swift album without us knowing at some point.
I would love that, personally. I mean, we've blown that already, but I would love that.
Okay. Craig, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Craig Mazin there. Now, you can catch up with Chernobyl on Sky On Demand and Now TV. And if you've just tuned in and missed the start of that interview, you can hear the whole thing on the Must Watch podcast. Just head to BBC Sounds. On tomorrow's show, Oscar-winning director Oliver Stone. Our School Runnings, we presented Denise Van Outen, and BAFTA award-winning actor Jason Watkins. That's it for me. It's now time for Drive with Anna and Tony.
Hi, Nihal. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Lots on the show today, including the singer Sam Fender, who's performing tonight, the first socially distanced gig in the UK.
In Focus is about the social model of disability, what it is, why it's different, and why people think it works better.
And why 125,000 students in Scotland could get an exam results boost.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
BBC News at 4 o'clock. This is Justine Green. Scotland's Education Secretary John Swinney has announced that all exam grades that have been after criticism of the decision by the Scottish Qualifications Authority to downgrade the performance of 76,000 pupils. Addressing the Scottish Parliament, Mr Swinney said no child would see their future plans affected.
The SQA will issue fresh certificates to affected candidates as soon as possible, and importantly will inform UCAS and other admission bodies of the new grades as soon as practical in the coming days, to allow for applications to college and university to be progressed. As the First Minister confirmed yesterday, in those cases where moderation led to an increased grade, learners will not lose that award.
Boris Johnson has insisted the UK still has a long way to go before a return to economic prosperity after the latest figures revealed the scale of job losses caused by the lockdown. The Office for National Statistics said 220,000 people were taken off payrolls between April and June. Labour has called on the government to boost consumer confidence, which would require businesses to hire more staff. Kate McCarthy, who runs a recruitment company, explained some of the types of vacancies firms were looking to fill.
We're seeing jobs in finance, HR, call centres, customer service requirement is higher because online presence is fine and okay, you don't need in store, but you do still need to talk to somebody when something goes wrong.
Debenhams has announced it's to cut 2,500 jobs from its stores and warehouses because of falling sales due to the coronavirus. The department store said the redundancy process would not involve store closures. Scotland Yard has said it has no further lines of inquiry into the Stephen Lawrence murder investigation and that the case will now be classed as inactive. The 18-year-old was attacked in southeast London in 1993, but only 2 of his 5 killers have faced justice. Russia has become the first country in the world to give regulatory approval to a vaccine for COVID-19. President Putin has said the jab offers sustainable immunity, but our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh says there's uncertainty about how effective it is.
My understanding is very few people have actually received the vaccine. Some reports saying it's fewer than 100. Now, what you could tell from those small number of people is what sort of immune response it gives, and in those short space of time whether it's had any serious side effects. The trouble is the Russians haven't released any data, so it's very difficult for any independent scientists to make any comment on that.
A couple from Southampton have been reunited with their pet tortoise of 50 years after he went missing last month. The RSPCA said they were confident that they found the reptile's rightful owners after they were able to correctly identify some of his unusual habits, including headbutting shoes and nibbling shoelaces. BBC News, it's 4:03.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live on digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
In travel news, the M62 in West Yorkshire on the westbound side, there's a breakdown. It's near Ainley Top at junction 24. Heading through to Huddersfield at 23, you'll find one of the lanes closed. In fact, they've just reopened that lane now, but the queues are still there, and they're all the way back to Brickhouse at junction 25. M62 again on the eastbound side at Milne Row, so heading away from Manchester at 21. 2 lanes closed for emergency repairs. The M6 a little bit slow northbound in Staffordshire. A lorry's broken down at Stafford Services, so that's got 1 lane closed as well now, the M6. And the M6 in the West Midlands southbound junction 10 at Walsall. There was a breakdown, so the queues are still there. All lanes are open, but taking you an extra 10 minutes to get through. M42 has 2 lanes closed at junction 6 for Birmingham Airport on the northbound side. That's because of an accident. The M40 and southbound queues at junction 5 at Stokenchurch after a breakdown, which is on the exit slip. And the M1 in Northamptonshire looking slow. Northbound 17 Dunchurch, a breakdown in 1 lane towards Rugby at 18. The M11 has a breakdown. It's at junction 8 near the A120. And on the southbound side, you'll find those queues. It's around Stansted as well, actually, that breakdown in 1 lane. And then the M25 queues, where 2 lanes are closed. Junction 10 at the Wisley interchange near the A3 on the clockwise side. There's a tyre on the road. All mentioned by Life Travel.
Order, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. On that breaking big news about the tortoise that's been found, and it was identified because of its habits, headbutts and shoes.
Yeah.
I've laboured under the apprehension, probably the misapprehension all my life, that the tortoise shell was like a fingerprint, that they were all different, and that maybe they should identify.
Maybe they are, but it'd be quite hard. It's quite easy to take a fingerprint, isn't it? It'd be a bit difficult to take a massive tortoise and turn it upside down. Scared that this is going to happen in the next few weeks or months. Do get in touch, get involved with that on the programme today.
Yes, we're going to talk in a moment about Scotland and exam results, and it pertains to the whole of the UK really, because results coming out elsewhere very shortly. 125,000 children will have their results reversed after they were downgraded, and so we heard from a girl yesterday who went from a B to an F. But it does mean pass rates will soar by 14% on last year in some areas. So we'll get into the whys and wherefores of that. Were teachers over-optimistic in the first place? Lots to discuss on that. And as I mentioned, we'll hear from Sam Fender.
Yes, I had the joy of listening into this when you recorded it earlier. And you know that brilliant scene in Phoenix Nights where Max and Paddy are testing out the two-way radios. And they're saying, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And one of them's just sailing down the road on the bus. Basically, that was exactly what you and Sam Fender did for about 10 minutes while he tried to get a signal at Gosforth Park.
Don't hope for a lot
which was
more.
Enjoyable. I'm sure it'll sound much neater when it appears on the programme later. But the raw version was quite a treat.
He's doing a socially distanced gig tonight, the first in the UK. So if you look at the field where it's taking place, everyone's got a little pen where 5 people can stand. You're penned in by scaffolding. We talked about that. We talked about his set list because I wondered if he was going to do any special socially distanced songs. Now, we thought we'd have your help with this today. What could he sing tonight socially distance related? Obviously don't send in Don't Stand So Close to Me, because that's the obvious one, but I thought maybe what about this one? It's a classic soul song, is this Don't Touch Me in the Awning.
In the awning?
Yeah, what if you were camping?
Really?
Yeah.
Are you sure it's awning?
The song's Touch Me in the Morning.
Oh, okay, right, yes.
You've adapted it.
No, I didn't realise
you'd
adapted it. I thought it was
right.
some weird song that you'd dug up from the archives.
Touch Me in the Awning.
Yeah, I was thinking it didn't really sound like a hit, but that'd be why.
So if you can add to that set list, or else it's going to be a pretty short gig, 85058 at BBC 5.
5 Live Breakfast.
Let's talk jobs. Basically, Sean, what is the picture?
The picture is of a lot of people being out of work. There's no sort of different way of looking at that. 730,000 fewer people are on payrolls in July compared to back in the beginning of March before lockdown began.
What's the trajectory? You say, there are some good things, there are some bad things.
These numbers this morning are driven by those people who are over 65 years old, people who are self-employed, and people who are part-time workers. So actually those in full-time employment, the picture has been a little bit better overall.
5 Live Breakfast, back tomorrow from 6. This is BBC Radio 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app. 5 Live Drive with Tony Livesey and Anna Foster.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Let's get straight to that story then from Scotland. After days of mounting pressure from students and teachers there over downgraded exam results, there's been a full climb down just a few moments ago by the Deputy First Minister John Swinney.
I can confirm to Parliament today that all downgraded awards will be withdrawn. Using powers available to me in the Education Scotland Act 1996, I am today directing the SQA to reissue those awards based solely on teacher or lecturer judgment. Schools will be able to confirm the estimates they provided for pupils to those that are returning to school this week and next. The SQA will issue fresh certificates to affected candidates as soon as possible, and importantly will inform UCAS and other admission bodies of the new grades as soon as practical in the coming days, to allow for applications to college and university to be progressed. As the First Minister confirmed yesterday, in those cases where moderation led to an increased grade, learners will not lose that award.
Well, these downgrades affected around a quarter of all results. The Scottish Shadow Education Secretary, Jamie Green, said the statement was an 18-page resignation letter without the resignation.
In extraordinary circumstances, Mr Swinney promised us an exam system which would disadvantage no one. He promised dialogue, openness and fairness for all. But what did we get instead? A methodology clouded in secret, a lack of transparency and engagement. Teachers were ignored, a postcode lottery which disgracefully penalised those from our toughest communities the most, a grading process which put the system ahead of the individual, an endless denial that there was a problem with any of this.
Well, our Scotland correspondent James Shaw joins us now. Hi, James.
Hi, Jamie.
James, look, I'm conscious, before we talk about what's happened today, can we just remind people who may not know of this moderation process? Who did it and what was the criteria?
Yeah, essentially what we had, Tony, was because there were no exams, teachers put in their estimates, their judgments of what their pupils were capable of achieving, and that was then kind of processed by some sort of algorithm run by the Scottish Qualifications Authority to try and make the outcome consistent with previous years, so to make sure that there wasn't a huge jump in the percentage pass rate and other factors in which represent the achievement of kids in Scotland. That was what they tried to do, but clearly it has led to a situation where people feel that they've been processed by a system which hasn't taken account of their individual efforts and their individual achievements, and that's how we end up with this situation where John Swinney has had to completely reverse the policy that the Scottish Government was sticking to until this weekend.
So we'll talk about the political ramifications for him in a moment, but what does it mean for students, what he said this afternoon?
Do you know, it's a rare thing, Tony, to kind of feel that you're actually possibly delivering a bit of good news for a change, because, for thousands of kids, and we're talking about, in fact, 76,000 individual candidates who had their grades lowered, 125,000 results amongst those 76,000 candidates. They have all now learnt, or will be learning very shortly, that what their teachers had said they were worth, that is what they will get, as opposed to what the system, what the algorithm has said they were worth. And they should find that out what those grades are within the next week or so. And John Swinney said that the certificates will be issued as soon as possible, so that this shouldn't, they say, it shouldn't affect people trying to get into colleges, into further education, into higher education and universities. So after what must have been a really depressing week for a lot of young people in Scotland, this is hopefully, for a lot of people, a significant turnaround.
James, there were claims and accusations of social inequality here driving these changes, because the downgrades affected most students, pupils in deprived areas. Do we know why that happened?
This is a really complicated one, Tony, but I'll try and keep it as simple as I can. What John Swinney pointed out today was that, in fact, pass rates in the most deprived areas had gone up more than they had for the least deprived areas. So how can you believe then that pupils in deprived areas were more disadvantaged. I think it is because this system didn't take account of the fact that if you have a school with a pupil who is performing, above the standards of those around them, the system couldn't take account of that. So the system looked at how schools had performed in the past, but it couldn't look at how they were performing now, whether they were achieving successes beyond what the school had achieved in the past. I know it is complicated, and you can see it from both sides, from the Scottish Government side and from the side of individual pupils. But what John Swinney ended up saying, he didn't admit that the system was really wrong, but he said that the perception that it was wrong was important. He didn't want pupils, particularly in working class areas or in deprived areas, to think that the system was rigged against them, which was the perception that was starting to build up. And that, he said, was what drove this U-turn.
Not everyone agrees with the outcome. Just Keith in Exeter, for example, just one example of a text that's coming in here now. He says these school exam results for 2020 are flawed. An employer will exclude those grades as fake. Is it a genuine question, James, to say, were teachers in some instances over-optimistic? Human instinct would mean they'd want to do their best for their pupils, maybe even in some cases the best for their careers. Is that a fair claim to make?
Some people have suggested that teachers in areas of deprivation may have been more generous to their pupils. They may have seen their potential and wanted to reflect that, as opposed to actually concrete achievements. That is a suggestion. I mean, there's no evidence that we can point to that actually proves that. But I suppose what it comes down to in the end, Tony, is that this is a unique year. And John Swinney kind of alluded to that. He said, you can't compare what happens this year with what happened last year or what will happen next year. This is a very unique circumstance. And I suppose, the feeling is that he talked about the trauma of the pandemic. Perhaps they hadn't appreciated the trauma of it for young people, and that it would be wrong to add to that by giving them grades that they felt were unfair to them. How these will be viewed by employers, impossible to know at this stage.
Well, that James, for now leads me to my final question. John Swinney mentioned, I don't know if you've got details of these, some of the now percentage rises in the pass rates, which were into double figures based on last year's results. So is that automatically going to skew the grades? How can next year's cohort hope to compete with this?
That's a very good question, Tony. There is going to be a review by an academic from Stirling University who's going to look at what's happened this year and how to deal with these situations in the future. So obviously it's very difficult to answer that question, but there does have to be some adjustment for the uniqueness of the year that we're in. Just a final thought. John Swinney's not totally out of the woods yet, Tony, because there is going to be an effort to get him to resign later in the week. There'll be a vote of no confidence on Thursday, and we'll see what that means about his future, let alone the future of the thousands of young people we've been talking about.
James, thank you. James Shaw, our Scotland correspondent there. So that's the story, certainly in Scotland, results coming out in England on Thursday. Wherever you are in the UK, if you're a teacher involved in that process, do you trust the process? And what about, can you honestly say that what you've done, you haven't overcompensated for some pupils? Let us take us through that process as far as you're concerned. Please let us know, 85058 at BBC 5 Live.
From exams to jobs, because the two go hand in hand, don't they? I mentioned we're going to talk about those really sobering figures on the jobs market that came out from the Office for National Statistics this morning. The number of people in work, and this is perhaps unsurprising given the pandemic and all the problems it's caused, but the number of people in work has fallen by its biggest amount for more than a decade. In the 3 months to June, 220,000 jobs were lost. Just this morning, Debenhams announced that it would be cutting 2,500 jobs, the kind of thing that once you would stop and be shocked by. But these huge numbers, we've been seeing them for weeks now, haven't we? If this does affect you, then do let us know, 85058. Sue in Liverpool was on with Nikki Campbell earlier. She was talking about her son, who was made redundant recently from an optician's. And then after hearing her on 5 Live Breakfast, Gavin in Liverpool got in touch to offer her son an interview.
Son works for very famous high street opticians, 5.5 years. Promoted to supervisor, then assistant manager last year. Has been furloughed since March. got a text message last Monday to say that he needed to come in and talk. Was told he was being made redundant because his job was a project. That's basically it.
Well, so Gavin, are you offering an interview?
Yes, of course, yeah. If he's available today, I'm interviewing all afternoon today, tomorrow. But yes, we're desperately looking for people. We've actually been let down 3 times with people that we've offered jobs to, where they've kind of contacted us the night before saying that they've basically they probably found something better, which I find difficult to believe.
Well, but they probably spread the net. You can understand.
Yeah, of course. You can't blame them. They're making big decisions for the future. But yeah, by all means, if she wants to ask her son to get in touch with me, I'd be more than happy to interview him.
We can get the numbers organised and stuff like that. Is he available today?
Yeah, he's in Liverpool City Centre. He lives in Liverpool City Centre.
All right.
Amazing.
What time, Gavin, shall we be around there?
Well, if he can get here for about 1 p.m. today, that'd be fantastic.
Whereabouts are you, Gavin?
We're Gloucester's 123, and we're based in Park Road, Liverpool, L8.
Oh, right, just down the road.
Yeah, so it's a stone throw if he's got a good arm.
Yeah, he's got long legs.
Yeah, there you go.
Great. I'm going to start an agency. That's good. This is all organised. And
so when's my interview, Gavin?
Yeah. Well, you're also.
If you want to come along with him.
Yeah, come along, because Sue's going to be your head of PR as well in the future.
Gavin, you would kill me.
It's a new post that I've just created. So there we are.
Yeah, well, they said the interview was 1 o'clock. I would love to be able to tell you whether or not he got the job, but I don't know. So you're going to have to listen to 5 Live Breakfast tomorrow morning to find out how that ended. Hopefully it was a good result for Sue's son. So we'll talk more about jobs, and as I said, your experience is really, really welcome on that, please. Also, on today's In Focus, where, every week we spend a bit of time looking at a topic that we could do with knowing more about, we should really spend more time on. Today it's the social model of disability, which, if you are disabled, this will immediately, no doubt, ring so many bells with you about the way you live your life and whether or not society is really doing what it should to cater for you. Essentially, the social model of disability is just a different way of thinking about disabled people to the traditional medical model, where it says that you are disabled by your medical condition and that's the end of it. The social model says that actually it's not the medical condition itself that's disabling, but the way that society is structured around disabled people that causes the problem, that we should make, for example, ramps for wheelchairs commonplace so it doesn't become an issue for people anymore. So as I was saying, your experience is really welcome on that as well. We're going to spend a lot of time on the programme really taking a deep dive into that. So your thoughts, particularly on the social model and how it works, very, very welcome.
Exam regrading in Scotland. Gareth in Derbyshire says it's perfectly reasonable for students to have upgraded estimates given that they unjustly had the opportunity. Now they are completely worthless. All employers will ignore any grades gained in 2020. In tortoise news, or tortoise news, however you want to pronounce it.
No, I've said tortoise for years, but the trouble is at the start of the programme you said tortoise at me so many times. I've realised that I'm now going down that road very slowly.
We've had a listener complain that I've said tortoise, so I'll say tortoise as long as I can remember. But anyway, I don't know what's right. But anyway, Ian says, hello, as a postman there are many hazards to watch out for, but I once was bitten by a tortoise. I was delivering to the owner's house and he had the tortoise in his hands, showing him to me. I was not really paying attention to him as he talking about the football, didn't have my eye on the tortoise. With surprising speed and cunning, he turned his head and bit my little finger. Oh, it hurt. From then on at work, I was known as Tortoise Finger.
Ian, look, I mean, I know the way you say with surprising speed and cunning. It is essentially a tortoise.
Oh, no, their heads are quick.
It won't have... No,
their heads are quicker than their legs.
It won't have moved that fast, surely. I think that's Ian just trying to put a brave face on it and not be embarrassed by the fact that he was bitten by a tortoise.
If you've got any other tortoise news, we'll happily have that. And also, on the programme today...
Say why but it really didn't sound like that.
Anyway, Sam Fender's on the show later on. He's doing the first socially distanced gig in the UK tonight. So we can talk all about that. And also, we were asking for your songs for the set list from a socially distanced gig. John says not leaving on a jet plane. I think that would be right up there.
That's right. I'm completely confused by the one that says Walk On by Steve Barnsley.
No, it's Walk On By.
Yes, I thought it might be. It took me a while to work it out. I sort of stared at it and thought, well, what's Steve? I've never heard of Steve Barnsley. Karen in Suffolk says, well, islands in the stream. You can't get more socially distant than having your own island.
Yes.
These things that they're going to stand on, they do look a bit like islands because they're raised up as well.
Cattle pens.
Yeah, they do. They don't look hugely comfortable. You wouldn't want to fall off one.
Keith suggests singing Get Back, which you could sing in that tone of voice if the crowd got too near the stage. So yes, socially distanced set list in honour of Sam Fender, who's on the show a little bit later. Right, it's Drive with Anna and Tony. It's 4:23.
And now we've just heard this news in the last hour or two. Scotland Yard says its investigation into the murder of Stephen Lawrence 27 years ago is going to be made inactive. The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Dame Cressida Dick, says all lines of inquiry have now been exhausted, but that her officers would look at any new leads.
This has been a huge set of investigations. 5 major investigations over the years, reviewed 17 times, and in the last phase, which is since 2014, we've been using every overt and covert technique available to us. But we've come to the view right now that there are no viable lines of inquiry. We've been working very closely with the Crown Prosecution Service, and people independent of the investigation have had a look to assure me there's nothing more can be done at the moment.
Well, let's talk to journalist Mark Daly, BBC investigative journalist who's done a lot of work on the Stephen Lawrence murder. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Hello there.
I hope you don't mind. I'm always conscious with a story like this, as we said, 27 years ago, there's a whole generation who will recognise Stephen Lawrence's name but maybe not know the detail of what happened to him back in 1993.
Yeah, well, in the Lawrence case, Stephen Lawrence case is one of the most important cases in the history of UK policing, but also really in the history of UK race relations. Stephen Lawrence was a black teenager who was murdered by a racist gang in 1993 in Eltham in South London, and it was inadequately investigated. The initial investigation was hampered by institutional racism, allegedly also corruption, and as a result there were no prosecutions and a variety of inquiries involving the Macpherson inquiry, which was one of the most seminal moments in the history of race relations, and it all stemmed out of the Stephen Lawrence's murder. And there were, as Cressida Dick said there were a variety of re-investigations until finally the Met got it right in 2012 when 2 of the 5 were convicted.
And there were, as you say, 5 altogether. 3 of those, what happened to the other 3?
Well, the 2 that were convicted in 2012, that was Gary Dobson and David Norris. They were sentenced to 15 and 14 years respectively. The other 3 principal suspects, widely suspected as being there on that night, were Jamie Acorts, Neil Acorts and Luke Knight. All 3 have always denied any involvement in the murder. Now, Jamie Acorts was sentenced to 9 years in prison in 2018. Neil Acorts, Jamie Acorts was sentenced to 9 years in prison in 2018. Neil Acorts sentenced to a similar amount, and he was also released just last year. Now, Luke Knight, the 5th, has lived a relatively quiet life, and he resides in London and has kept his head below the parapet. But these 5, there has been, and they are remain the kind of most notorious group in South London. Their names are associated with the Stephen Lawrence case, and probably will be forevermore.
You get the sense, Mark, and obviously, as we said, you've followed this case for a long, long time. The way that this has been announced today, with a statement from the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, they realise finally the sensitivity, because of all of the delays and the incompetence and the institutional racism that existed at the time within the force. They realise that declaring a case like this inactive needs to be done very delicately.
Indeed it does, and the Lawrence family have been the most formidable of opponents for the Metropolitan Police. I don't think it's an understatement to say that the Met have been terrified of Doreen Lawrence, Stephen's mum. since the 1990s. She has been a constant thorn in their side because she is a grieving mother who has demanded justice. Justice that she felt was denied to her family because of the colour of her son's skin. And so, this decision will not have been taken lightly. I think it will probably have been taken with a lot of discussions with the Lawrence family. They themselves, I think, were getting towards the point where they perhaps needed some closure. And I suspect very strongly that this decision will have been taken in conjunction with them. Will it be the last note in this story? Well, I mean, this investigation has been wound down before. It was wound down in the early 2000s. It was a BBC programme in 2006 that regenerated it and resulted in the reinvestigation by DCI Clive Driscoll, which eventually led to the convictions. Now, so in this case, which has had more twists and turns than any in the history of the criminal justice system in the UK, you can never say never. Now, just in the last few minutes, I spoke to Clive Driscoll, the man who eventually secured the 2 convictions of Dobson and Norris back in 2012. He would only say that he was sad that he didn't get the rest of the gang.
So the choice of words by the Met here, inactive rather than closed, that's really important.
Of course, and it took a forensic breakthrough in 2007 to reignite this case. It was a new bit of DNA which was discovered as a result of developing techniques. I suspect that the forensic side of things will have been exhausted. And if this case was to reopen in any way, it will be a significant witness, a confession, or something like that. But like I say, this has been the most long-running saga, 27 years and counting. So we should never say never.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Daly, BBC investigative journalist who's done a lot of work on the Stephen Lawrence murder over the last 27 years or so. You're listening to Drive. It's 4:30.
On digital, BBC Sounds, smart speaker and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
The headlines then on Drive this afternoon. Tens of thousands of school pupils are to have their exam results upgraded after the Scottish Government agreed to accept teacher estimates of scores. It's after a moderation system downgraded many results. The Education Secretary, John Swinney, says he's sorry for the feeling of unfairness. Boris Johnson says there are bumpy months ahead, but he's confident the UK will recover from the economic downturn following lockdown. It's after official figures show the number of people employed fell by 220,000 between April and June. Those who are furloughed or on 0 hours contracts with no work aren't included. And Debenhams is the latest retailer to announce jobs losses. 2,500 are going across its stores and warehouses. And health officials in Russia have approved the world's first vaccine for COVID-19. President Putin says the jab offers sustainable immunity, but the World Health Organization says it needs to carry out its own testing. Right, that is the news. With the sport, here's Deleth. Hello.
Afternoon, Tony. Celtic and Aberdeen have paid the price after their players broke lockdown rules.
Consider today the yellow card. The next time it will be the red card because you will leave us with absolutely no choice.
Both clubs' next 2 matches have been called off after Celtic defender Bolly Bolingoli flew to Spain and failed to quarantine on his return before then playing at Kilmarnock on Sunday, while the weekend before 8 Aberdeen players visited a bar together. The Scotland First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says they can't make exceptions for footballers. Our reporter Roddy Forsyth explains that Celtic are investigating Bolingoli's actions.
As I understand it, they have no idea why he went. He simply did this at short notice, didn't tell anybody he'd done it, didn't tell anybody he'd gone, otherwise he wouldn't have been in the squad for the game against Kilmarnock, and so he imperiled the Kilmarnock players and staff and also the Celtic players and staff. No one has at the moment a plausible explanation for why he did what he did, which was take a day trip to Spain.
Wolves will contest the club's first European quarter-final in 48 years later. It's winner-takes-all in Germany as they play Sevilla for a place in the semi-finals, where they'll face Manchester United. This season's Europa League winners will qualify for next season's Champions League. So is that spurring on Wolves midfielder Ruben Neves?
We don't think a lot about that. Our philosophy since I'm here is game by game, and now even more because this tournament now is like all the games are like finals. It's just one leg. Any team can go through. So we'll look at Sevilla first and we'll try to go through.
There's commentary and all the build-up in 5 Live Sport from 7. Let's check in at the World Snooker Championship, where defending champion Judd Trump is battling to avoid a quarter-final exit. Ronnie O'Sullivan is also in action. A good afternoon to Jamie Broughton, watching at the Crucible.
Good afternoon, Dallas. The defending champion resumed trailing Karen Wilson by 10 frames to 6. He then made breaks of 72, 162 to win 3 out of the next 4 to trail 11-9. Wilson then took frame 21, so leads 12 now, 12-9. And the Kettering star is now back at the table again. He's on a break of 67 and looks like he's going to wrap up victory here and knock out the defending champion. No first-time winner, of course, has ever retained the title. It looks like the Crucible curse is about to strike again. On the other table, the 5-time champion Ronnie O'Sullivan taking on the 3-time winner Mark Williams. Williams is now 8-6 up.
This coverage on BBC Two and via the BBC Sport app. Thank you for the time being, Jamie. England fast bowler Stuart Broad has been fined 15% of his match fee after using inappropriate language when dismissing Yasir Shah in the first test against Pakistan at Old Trafford. Meanwhile, in the Bob Willis Trophy today, there were wins for Essex, Hampshire and Yorkshire. And Harlequins will be without their new Springbok signings for the resumption of the Premiership season. Centre Andre Esterhuizen and prop Wilco Lowe have yet to arrive at the club because their visa process is being held up due to the lockdown in South Africa. Paul Gustard is Harlequins head of rugby.
The ability to get in and get the necessary paperwork done with the amount of places shut down has just taken a lot longer than we obviously all anticipated, which has been frustrating. But, you know, we've actually got numbers and there'll be a nice boost when these guys arrive to give us a lift.
Harlequins resume their season.
Sounds, smart speaker and online.
In travel news, I'm just having a look at the M62 eastbound, junction 21 at Wilne Road to 22, Rishworth Moor, 2 lanes closed for repairs. Westbound, there was a breakdown. It's left queues from 25 Brickhouse all the way to Huddersfield at junction 23. The M6 in the West Midlands northbound, there was an obstruction at junction 10 at Walsall. It's gone. The M4, 2 breakdowns eastbound, one at Reading at 11 in 1 lane closed, and then further east at junction 6 for Slough. Another breakdown there again, 1 lane closed. The M25 has 2 lanes closed at junction 10 for the A3 at the Wisley interchange, and anti-clockwise across the top slow, there's a lorry having a tyre change at Enfield at junction 25. Warner Merchant, 5 Live Travel.
Thank you. I was just going to say, I don't want to sound like a teacher, but just looking at some of these texts that are coming in for socially distanced songs.
Oh, yes.
You know, what was the one I struggled with? Oh, it was Walk On by Steve Barnsley.
Yeah, he's not an artist, by the way.
Yes, that was the one that threw me slightly. So now Stuart Bristol, which I'm assuming is Stuart, Bristol,
yes.
Has texted, "Stay away, Elvis Presley."
Yes.
I don't think he's going near you, Stuart, but I assume it's hot and it's the middle of August and you need to direct me with a bit of pronunciation, a bit of what's the word I'm looking for, punctuation.
What about Bette Midler's From a Distance? That'd be all right at the social distance gig, would it not?
So yeah, that would be all right.
Says John. Culture Club singing Move Away, says Wendy in Norwood. I've never even heard that song, actually.
No, I haven't.
I don't know how that one goes. You know, we were also, apropos nothing, right at the start of the show, the first news bulletin talked about a tortoise headbutting shoes.
Yes.
And then Ian said he was bitten by one and you poo-pooed that, saying they can't move quickly enough.
Right.
Jim from County Durham says, while visiting our son in Lima, Peru, so you're all right with that, Lima, Peru.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
We were invited to a barbecue spelt in full. The host had a large garden and an equally large pet tortoise. We ate outside and everyone took it in turns to put the tortoise into a wheelbarrow which it filled and push it downhill to the far end of the garden. That gave us about a 10-minute respite before it sprinted back up the hill and attempted to bite someone's foot.
Excellent. I mean, that is unusual barbecue entertainment, isn't it? But having said that, there's clearly something in this tortoise love of feet thing going on, because the one that was lost, the reason they worked out who it belonged to is because it liked headbutting shoes and nibbling laces.
And we still haven't answered the first question I asked, which I thought all tortoise shells were individual to their owner.
Silence as a no. Sorry.
Have you ever seen 2 tortoises look alike?
I don't think I've ever seen two tortoises next to each other, to be honest.
You've not lived.
No, I haven't, have I? Clearly not. I need to expand my horizons. Good. It's Drive. It's 23 minutes to 5 now.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live, available on the BBC Sounds app. 5 Live Drive with Tony Livesey and Anna Foster.
Now, Celtic and Aberdeen have had their next 2 Scottish Premiership matches postponed after their players broke lockdown rules. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon demanded the cancellation after Celtic defender Bolly Bolingoli flew to Spain, failed to quarantine and then played in a match. Ms Sturgeon said it was a flagrant breach of the guidelines, while Celtic manager Neil Lennon described himself as livid. He called the player incredibly selfish. And the previous weekend, of course, 8 Aberdeen players broke lockdown regulations by visiting a bar together. Here is Nicola Sturgeon explaining the decision at her regular briefing this afternoon.
I don't want the season to be in jeopardy. I don't want people who are not responsible for this to pay the price. But we have to be very clear this situation is not acceptable. Let me end by putting this as clearly as I can in language that the football world will understand. Consider today the yellow card. The next time it will be the red card because you will leave us with absolutely no choice.
Well, let's get more detail from BBC Scotland sports presenter Laura McGee. Hello, Laura.
Hello there.
This just looks really, really bad, doesn't it? The regulations are pretty clear.
Yeah, they are very, very clear, and it's actually important to go back and recap what has happened over the past week or two, because it's not just a sort of single incident today, and just why there is so much anger about what happened. So 2 weekends ago, on the 1st of August, the Scottish Premiership season, it got underway as per coronavirus protocols, like the Premier League and other football leagues across the world. The players, staff, managers, they have to adhere to specific rules such as social distancing, COVID-19 testing, no fans. They're separated across changing rooms, for example. In order for football to return, they have to adhere to these rules, as they were given, certain leniencies in order to get the sport back, unlike other industries. This hope of a bubble of which they stayed in is to stop any danger of coronavirus spreading. So that first weekend, 10 days ago, Aberdeen played Rangers, losing 1-0. That night, 8 Aberdeen Football Club players broke lockdown regulations by visiting an Aberdeen city centre bar restaurant together. The reason they broke the regulations is because a group of 8 exceeded the number of households that are permitted to meet up. Shortly after that, Saturday, 2 of those players tested positive for COVID-19 and the remaining 6 had to self-isolate after coming into close proximity. And no doubt you'll have seen that the pictures of those people queuing and mingling outside Aberdeen pubs and restaurants that weekend. The city had a spike in COVID-19 cases, many of which directly associated with a number of these establishments, which resulted in the city being put back into lockdown and Aberdeen's league match against Hamilton being postponed. And a lot of anger surrounding the players, questions as to why they were there after losing in the first place, but also why they didn't know the rules. So fast forward to yesterday, there was actually a meeting between Scotland's National Clinical Director and Premiership club captains and managers, outlining that they must adhere to these rules and reminding them of their responsibilities. So could there have been a worse time for this news today that Celtic defender Bolly Bolingoli broke the guidelines after he failed to quarantine after a 2-day trip to Spain, playing in a match with, of course, not only his own team, Celtic, but also in the vicinity of Kilmarnock, who he played against last weekend. But it is important to stress that all COVID-19 tests at Celtic have been negative as of yet.
We'll speak to Professor Jason Leach in just a moment, Scotland's National Clinical Director. Laura, we said that Neil Lennon says, frankly, he's livid about this. What about the SFA? What's their position been?
Yeah, so this morning the SFA, they were in talks with the Scottish Government discussing next steps. They paused for the government briefing where this was all highlighted by questions, and they actually went back into these talks again this afternoon, highlighting that this is a big deal. They want it sorted and sorted properly. The Scottish Government is clear that it is only by following the rules and keeping people safe that football is able to continue, and they don't want to see this season put at risk. Having said that, the SFA will no doubt have their head in their hands at this further blow. There's been pretty clear guidelines put in place for players, managers and staff. They said in a statement today that they agree wholeheartedly with the unequivocal message relayed to managers and captains by Professor Jason Leach last night, and clubs and players are in no doubt that there is now no more margin for error and no more scope for further breaches.
What about public reaction to this, Laura? Because obviously if people are following the rules, you would imagine there's a degree of frustration when they see footballers who aren't.
I think so, and I think that was addressed in what Nicola Sturgeon said in her briefing today, when she actually, she made quite a lot of critical statements about the footballers. Specifically, she said that they were privileged, and that she hoped that the football world would understand that today was the yellow card, next time it will be the Reds, because of course they are in a privileged situation. They have been allowed to go back to their place of work, where so many people haven't been able to go back to their industries and go back to their places of work. They've been given this opportunity to be in this so-called bubble of which they can go back and do the sport that they love, when so many other sports are not able to return at all yet. So I think there is a lot of anger. I mean, there was certainly a lot of anger when it came out last week about the Aberdeen players, and Nicola Sturgeon said she herself was furious that people are being allowed to sort of flout these rules and regulations. And I think that a lot of people will be saying the same thing as Nicola Sturgeon. This is now the last time. It cannot happen again.
Laura, thank you. Laura McGee, BBC Scotland's sports presenter. As I mentioned, Professor Jason Leach joins us as well, Scotland's National Clinical Director, who's been having those discussions with the Scottish Premiership clubs over the last few days. Professor Leach, thank you for joining us.
Evening, everybody. How are you?
We're really well, thank you. I mean, we heard there about livid, angry, furious. You've made the guidelines clear. What are your emotions when you see this happening?
Yeah, disappointed. Not just angry. Disappointed for a number of reasons. The thing that individuals put at risk, first of all, is their own health and the health of their loved ones. I'm not trying to exaggerate the nature of this virus. This virus kills people. People get properly sick from this virus, even young, fit people. And certainly if you take it home to less fit and older people, you put them at risk. Now, that's true of all of us. It's true of you and me and any of us who break the guidance. The added difference here is, as Laura expertly explained, is these guys have an extra responsibility. They're role models to the population, to a particularly difficult to reach bit of the population, often young men who don't tend to listen to the First Minister's briefings and me doing press conferences. They look for guidance from role models, and that's the added responsibility that footballers have, and they've let themselves and the population down.
Well, we talk about potentially pausing the season, stopping all Scottish Premiership games if people can't stick to the rules. Is that something you would be prepared to do, to take a step so extreme?
Well, yeah, we considered it in the last 24 hours. I was on a call last night, and my understanding is it's the first time ever that all of the Scottish Premiership football managers and captains have been on the same call to hear a message. Now, it was on Zoom, so I told them in no uncertain terms that this virus kills people. I told them a story of a young friend of mine who is a fit paramedic and has had 4 months off work as a result of this virus. He's well and back at work, but was at times close to proper trouble. And I told them that they had a responsibility at a number of levels, both as footballers and as human beings, to follow these rules. During that talk with them, the story of this Celtic player broke. So it's really, really difficult not to then think, okay, all bets are off. Here's another breach. So we've reached today, I think, a position with the SPFL and the SFA and the government and the Minister for Sport and me, where we've decided the proportionate response is to cancel, postpone 3 games, including these clubs. And then the SPFL will now put in place extra education, extra enforcement, extra advertising of the things that the clubs and the players need to do. And by the weekend, they will have reassured us that everything is in place that needs to be. But, as you heard Laura say, both the First Minister and I said today that this is a yellow card and a red card is available to us. I don't want to do that. I'm a fan. I don't want to do that. That's the last thing I want to do for elite sport in Scotland. But it is available to us.
And you would be prepared to use it?
Of course, we have to be prepared to use it. You've seen both the authorities in England and the authorities in Scotland close down cities. I mean, we're in unprecedented times. 20 million people have caught this virus, and 750,000 people have died. So you have to have powers that you're not used to doing. We have shut high streets, we've shut schools, and now, fortunately, today in Scotland, the schools are reopening. But you have to, therefore, be able to go backwards if you've gone forwards.
Professor Jason Leach, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Scotland's National Clinical Director on that news that the season in Scotland continues for now, but any more breaches, and it quite clearly won't.
Before 5 o'clock, we're going to talk about this bonkers weather. I've brought my brolly in today now. It's not going to thunderstorm on the way back to the car.
You brought a brolly?
Yeah, well, I like to be prepared.
I haven't even got my coat on today.
Well, you're not coming under my brolly, put it that way.
Well, socially distant.
Yeah.
Actually, in fact, the polite thing to do, the polite thing to do would be to offer a lady your brolly.
Just after. Right, it is 4:48 now on Drive. Every week on the programme we give some attention to an area that's often overlooked, particularly whilst coronavirus is taking so much of our time and energy. This segment's called In Focus. We try to dig a little bit into the detail rather than just having a superficial chat about an item. Today we're going to talk about the social model of disability, what it means, how it differs to the current widely used medical model and where it's being implemented. We're going to hear from a lot of experts throughout the programme, and we want your experiences as well. Plenty of you texting in already just on generalities of life of someone with a disability. 85058 at BBC 5 Live. We're going to talk about the model itself, and it's really fascinating at 5:30. We're joined now by Emma Tracy, BBC journalist, producer of the BBC Ouch podcast that spotlights the lives and experiences of disabled people. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Life's challenging enough as it is. What about the pandemic itself and lockdown, etc.? What I know we're asking you to generalise, but how has life been for those with disabilities during lockdown? Do we think how's it affected them?
Oh, I think it's ebbed and flowed like it has for everybody, and there's been an awful lot of uncertainty. There's been some really good things as well, so I'll try and cover both. I mean, let's start with, I guess, shielders. So you've got your official shielders who got that special letter and phone call, etc. But there's also an awful lot of people who have been unofficially shielding, who are disabled, who are very, very concerned about getting coronavirus. And they have been... I mean, at one point in the pandemic, the disability charity Scope put out some research that said that 1 in 5 of these people, disabled shielders, said that they wouldn't be stopping shielding until there was a vaccine or a proven treatment. So there's a lot of people staying in the house, and I've spoken to some people who are planning to shield until Christmas and really don't trust people. They'd rather if people wore masks everywhere, not just in the places that they're supposed to, and they're anxious about going out, and that's a real problem, I suppose. And then, particularly people going to university who are shielding, obviously the results are out this week, and they're worried that universities don't have plans in place and they're not going to be able to leave their room if lockdown changes or if they're asked to shield again. So that's a really big problem as well. Yeah. And you were talking about jobs as well. I think people who are shielding and other disabled people are really worried about the employment gap widening. A lot of people are afraid to go back to work who had jobs, and the shielding support has stopped. So that's a worry as well. I mean, the employment gap is already 30% between disabled and non-disabled people. So that's a real worry as well. We talk about masks. I suppose we know that there's lots of exemptions around masks, but at the moment, we're hearing lots of stories of disabled people being called out for not wearing them, and that's really anxiety-provoking, especially if they're exempt, and especially if they're exempt for like a mental health reason or an anxiety reason. To be then called out is really difficult. But we've had some. Obviously, the lip reading is a problem. Very, very few masks have clear panels, so going out if lip reading is a communication tool you use for any reason at all, that's a real issue. I mean, we've had some really nice things too. People have been working from home, and a lot of the I know you're going to talk about the social model of disability and the medical, and there's a lot of the physical and social barriers to working outside the home and in an office and that kind of thing have been removed, and people have found working from home. Some people have found working from home a huge benefit. I
can see that. When we are going to talk about this social model, what about what about levels of insight between disabled people and those who aren't? This is quite interesting. Tim texted the programme. to say being socially isolated has been a way of life when you have a disability, but when the bulk of the population are under house arrest, there's a realisation of the frustration of having your freedom limited. Do you think there's any crossover there, that actually those who aren't disabled, Emma, might have some insight now into what life's like, even in such a small way?
Yes, I think there has been insight. I think we produced a strand on the Ouch podcast called Cabin Fever, which covered a lot of that. And, you know, disabled people were actually giving non-disabled people who were now inside tips on how to sort of survive weeks long indoors, and, you know, remembering to open a window and trying to structure your day, because obviously, you know, there's lots and lots of people with chronic health issues who are inside all the time. I mean, there's a thing about how long that insight will remain. So as lockdown eases and restrictions lift, I think some of those people who were talking in the beginning about how sort of freeing that felt to that other people knew what was going on for them, are feeling a little bit more difficult and a little bit more left out now that things are sort of going back to some sort of new normal. Because I think, you know, non-disabled people forget, you know, they get the insight and then it's forgotten again, and it's a pity, because it was a huge, wonderful learning thing that happened. So it would be nice if we could hold on to some of that.
Can just before you go, can I just talk about, just briefly, because we're going to look at this in a lot more detail later on, about this difference between the medical model and the social model, this notion that you're not defined by your condition or whatever. You're defined. You know, it's society needs to move forward. In other words, it's society's problem. The fact that there aren't facilities everywhere. We shouldn't look to the disabled person as having the difficulties. We should look to society not helping enough. Do you go along with that? Is it a model that you agree with?
I think it's a model that was developed by disabled people in the 70s and 80s. The medical model was a model that was developed by doctors for their needs, and so a lot of people do go along with it as disabled people. I think there are people who might have mental health difficulties who find it difficult to get right behind it, because obviously there are times when barriers or no barriers, it's impossible to do the things that you want to do, and some people might feel like the social model isn't exactly for them. And there's like the psychosocial model, which is about having a mental health difficulty.
That's
experience. And people have come up with all sorts of models. So
I think we're losing Emma. I think we've lost her. We get the picture. We're going to look at that in a lot more detail a little bit later on. That's Emma Tracy, BBC journalist and producer of the BBC Ouch podcast.
She must be in the same area as Sam Fender.
Yeah.
Because he had technical issues. But we persisted, regardless.
Nothing if not persistent.
No, exactly. And it'll sound perfect
Steve,
when you hear it after 5.
In my reluctance to get you under my brolly later on, Steve says, I would give you my brolly and put my coat across any puddles for you to walk on.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you, Steve. That's very nice of you. You should take a lesson from Steve in chivalry.
Yeah.
Is that all you've got to say?
Yeah.
Good. Right, let's move swiftly on then.
I've got a coat is the answer to that. Actually.
You what?
If I think about it, I've not.
Well, it's the idea. Even if you did have, you wouldn't share it. Your misery. Thank you, Steve. That's very kind of you. Look, we're going to talk about the weather. The fact that at the moment we don't need the brolly round here. Hopefully we won't. It's been incredibly hot. There's been a few thunderstorms around. So let's talk to friend of Drive, weatherman Owain Wynne Evans. Owain, hello.
Hello both, how are you?
Hello. Very well, how are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. I'm just, trying to avoid these downpours.
Well, yes.
But yes, it's all good.
Yeah, feeling hot.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's been really hot now for quite a couple of days across much of the UK. It has been the main kind of headline as far as the weather is concerned, of course. And, we really have seen exceptional temperatures. So Tuesday, today, could see the maximum in the southeast exceed 34 Celsius again. It looks like we're on track for that to happen. Heathrow currently just over 33 Celsius. Now, what's significant about this is it would be the 5th day in a row to reach at least 34 Celsius, which is thought to be an unprecedented event in the UK. And if we see that again tomorrow, both, that would be the 6th day in a row where we see those temperatures in the southeast over 34 Celsius.
Thing is, Owen, I always feel a bit cheated when you get the heat and not the sun. You know, when it's cloudy, but you're still sweaty, and it's like if I'm going to feel, clammy and uncomfortable, I at least want a few sun rays to make me feel better about it,
Welcome to my world.
Absolutely. I totally agree, Anna. And also, if you've got the sun, you've got a bit more of a holiday feel then.
Yes.
Haven't you,
definitely. We need that at the moment, don't we? So what about the thunderstorms then? Because I'm hearing they might hang around for 2 weeks, or at least until the end of this week. What's happening?
Yeah, we have a weather warning in force, and this yellow weather warning has covered much of the UK. It was in force yesterday, it's in force today, it remains in place tomorrow, affecting many parts of the UK. We have this very hot, unstable air at the moment, and as you mentioned in the link there, we are seeing them popping up here and there, but it's not a kind of a widespread story. So yes, we are likely to see further thundery downpours overnight. Some of these downpours have caused some issues with localised flooding in some places over the past 24 hours. And both, we could see more of that as we look deeper into the crystal ball, as I like to say, over the next couple of days with this very unstable air and further thundery downpours around. And what's really frustrating, as a weather presenter about showers and thunderstorms, and this isn't me kind of saying, you can't forecast them properly, but they're really hard to forecast.
Are they hard to pin down? And everybody wants to know where they are. That's the question everybody asks you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand why, because if you're going out, you want to know whether you're going to be drenched or
not. Well, of course you do. It's important stuff. Oh, and it's always a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you both. Lovely to speak to you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
I have a very specific weather forecast for you.
Go on.
On Friday of this week, my niece turns 3. And we are planning to spend the day, I in my swimming costume, on West Wittering Beach. So I can guarantee, if that's your plan, there'll be no sunshine. There'll probably be thunderstorms. It'll be miserable. That's if I'm there in a cosy.
Wait a minute. You're in a cosy. What are you doing?
Probably avoid. Well, I'm going to have a splash around. Might do a bit of paddle boarding, that kind of thing. But I can guarantee the weather's going to be awful if I'm going to be there in a cosy.
I can guarantee Stevie wants to put his coat down before he'll be there with his binoculars. Where are you again? Whitting what?
West Wittering Beach.
West Wittering
on the
Beach.
beautiful south coast.
How apt?
How apt? Oh, how rude! How very rude.
Oh, I haven't had time to prove my tortoise theory, have you?
Yeah, maybe we'll squeeze that in the next hour.
On digital,